Chair Parker, I believe almost everybody is in.
Okay, so I think, good evening, everyone. I think the first order of business is that we have a request for translation, Cantonese translation. So we will turn it over to our interpreter.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Terry and I will be your Cantonese interpreter for the meeting tonight. 大家好，晚上好。Terry 同我會係你今天晚上嘅廣東話翻譯員。一陣間你見到個地球嘅時候咧，撳落去揀廣東話個圖標，就會去到廣東話嘅翻譯頻道啦。如果用手機或者平板電腦咧，撳嗰三個點，點點點再揀更多，亦都會去到廣東話嘅翻譯頻道嘅喎。唔該晒大家，一陣間見。我 said，thank you。
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Okay. Good evening. I am calling this public meeting to order at 6 p.m. in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGLC 131, Section 40, and the Boston Wetlands Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Chapter 7-1.4. The Boston Conservation Commission will hold a virtual public hearing this evening on February 19th, 2025, to review the following projects to determine what conditions, if any, the Commission will impose in order to protect the interests of the public and private water supply, groundwater, prevention of pollution, flood control, prevention of storm damage, protection of fisheries and land containing shellfish, and protection of wildlife habitat. This evening's hearings will be followed by our regular meeting, and in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, we are conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the Conservation Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. Members of the public may have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions. To do so, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. For the record, I am Michael Parker, Chair of the Commission. Could staff please identify themselves?
Elena Itamari with the Environment Department.
Dee Dee Hernandez with the Environment Department.
Vivian De La Paz with the Environment Department.
Great, thank you. Now I'll call the roll of commissioners present. Commissioner Sullivan?
John Sullivan.
Commissioner Linay?
Amy Linay.
Commissioner Richmond?
Alice Richmond.
Commissioner Herbst?
Ian Herbst.
Great, thank you. Before we begin, the following two items have been continued to the next hearing on March 5th, 2025. They are notice of intent for DEP file number 0062025 from GEI Consultants on behalf of the Massachusetts Port Authority for the proposed repairs to the existing timber fender system and resurfacing of the existing concrete wharf deck at berth 17 and Conley Terminal, 20 Farragut Road, South Boston. Resource areas are designated port area, land under ocean, coastal bank, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and 100-foot buffer to coastal bank. The other hearing that has been continued is notice of intent for DEP file number unassigned from Foth Infrastructure and Environment LLC on behalf of the Massachusetts Port Authority for the proposed increase in load capacity within a section of the existing Black Falcon terminal structure with the use of reinforced concrete beams and driven steel piles at 1 Black Falcon Ave in South Boston. The resource area is land subject to coastal storm flowage. We'll now begin the other public hearings. First item on the agenda is notice of intent for DEP file number 006-2022 from Foth on behalf of the Massachusetts Port Authority for the proposed subsurface geotechnical and environmental investigation, which consists of conducting up to 6 in-water borings and up to 6 land-based borings at Piers Park 2, 95 Marginal Street in East Boston. Resource areas are land under ocean, coastal bank, fish runs, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Good evening, Chair Parker. Chris Bush, Environmental Permitting and Planning with Massport, here with our consultants, Foth.
Yep, and this is Paul Marsala, Project Manager with Foth, presenting on behalf of Massport.
Yeah, and again, these are borings necessary to advance design for a new seawall as part of Piers Park 2.
Great, floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So, yeah, as Chris mentioned, so this is for the geotechnical investigations and environmental investigations in support of the proposed seawall replacement at Pierce Park 2. This project would finish the work that was started at Pierce Park to improve safety at the interface with Boston Harbor. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is the location map of the project site. This is the project is at the interface of Boston Harbor at the southern extent of Pierce Park 2, located in between Pier 1 and Pier 3. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the proposed revetment. This revetment would replace the existing seawall that's in disrepair. The proposed geotechnical and environmental investigations are to support the 30% design of this revetment. Next slide. This is a location plan of 2 out of the 4 borings from 2 different views. So the proposal is to perform 4 total borings. 2 of them are in the water, 2 of them are landside. So this slide shows from 2 different angles the proposed locations of the 2 water borings. Next slide, please. So this shows the location of the 2 landside borings that we propose. They'll take place in between the current the blocks and curb and the water itself. There's a 20-foot area. You'll also see in the left photo there is some existing erosion controls that are still in place that will remain in place throughout this investigation. Next slide. It's a plan view of the 4 locations. So as was mentioned in the introduction, this is a proposal for 4 boring locations, up to 3 holes per location as required to collect enough sediment for all of the tests that are required. It's anticipated that only 1 hole at each location will be required, but we've put in our notice of intent for up to 3 holes at each location, depending on the quality of recovery of sediment for the tests that are required. The tests we propose will be down to minus 45 feet nav the 88. So for reference, the land side is about plus 10. So it's a approximately 55-foot deep boring, and we'll be advancing that with continuous sampling for the top 15 feet. Those samples will be sent to the lab for environmental testing, and each hole will be advanced down to minus 55, and that will be in for the geotechnical testing, which is standard penetration tests, as well as some split spoons and Shelby tubes if we encounter any clays, and that will be in support of the geotechnical design of the revetment. And that's all I have. Open to any questions that the commission may have.
Great. Okay, thank you, Paul. Just before we get going here, as a reminder to members of the public, to provide public comment, please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. The only things I have, one, are you employing a barge here?
There will be a barge for the 2 water-based borings, yes.
Okay, so you have a spill plan for the barge, I assume?
Yep, we have a spill plan drafted. We'll be sending that. We'll understand that will be part of the order of conditions to have that submitted prior to work starting.
Great, thank you. And then as far as the testing itself, once you're done with the testing, and I guess this is a question to Chris, will you be sending in the results of the testing to staff?
If that's requested, I think we can provide that, correct, Paul?
We could certainly provide that. There'll be 2 sets of tests. One would be environmental parameters for suitability determination to take any materials to an end use facility. And then the other set would be geotechnical. We could provide both if requested.
Perfect, good. I think we'd be interested in both. I was thinking more along the lines of the environmental, but both would be good to have, because you are going to be, this is part of a larger project coming down the pike here. So And then last thing, Chris, not that it's pertinent to tonight's hearing, but we did get some comments from some of your former colleagues at the city regarding the elevations commitment for the project writ large when that gets going. So not really within the purview of this hearing, but any deviation from that?
No, I'm well aware that the city's received some Phase 1 funding through FEMA as part of the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program to advance design for the Lewis Mall Carlton Wharf area of East Boston. When Pierce Park 2 was completed, part of that design was to meet the city as well as Massport's flood design elevations for the park, and the intent for that comprehensive flood protection design is to tie that elevation into Pierce Park Lane. So I know Massport is committed to some further elevation of Pierce Park Lane and or tying into a deployable to ensure we have comprehensive protection in that portion of East Boston.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I see Rich McGinnis has his hand up. So Rich is a longtime city employee. So let's make him a part of this hearing. Rich, what do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm Rich McGinnis. I'm Deputy Director for Coastal Resilient Infrastructure Delivery at the City of Boston Planning Department. And we've been great partners with Massport. They've been very helpful and collaborative in addressing our long-term need to build in flood defense mechanisms along the East Boston shoreline. As Chris mentioned, they've elevated sections of Pierce Park Phase 2 to meet our target elevation. And have committed to connecting Pierce Park 2 to our FEMA-funded resilient project at Lewis Street and Carlton Wharf, which is great progress. That'll close a significant flood path into East Boston, protecting critical infrastructure and residents. I'm just, I know this is just for the geotech work, and we can follow up on the design of the actual seawall. Something that the city is considering as the shepherd of Harbor Walk is that Harbor Walk be elevated and protected from astronomical high tides in the future. We have a target elevation of 12.8 NAVD 88, which would mean that Harbor Walk would remain dry during future astronomical high tides, king high tides. It could still be floodable during coastal storms when you typically wouldn't want to be on the Harbor Walk. So we'd like to continue. We're meeting monthly with Massport on our coastal resilient work. We want to make sure that the seawall, that Harbor Walk could either be elevated now or at least accommodate that additional load, to address that higher elevation in the future. It may not make sense to do that now since the flanking properties are at a lower elevation, but that's what I'm weighing in on, and we'll continue to engage with Massport on this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like, or maybe not, you'd have an interest in the geotech data from this round of testing, or it's
I mean, it'd be helpful to see, but we are meeting monthly with Massport on this, and it's just more the feasibility. Maybe it's something that can't be accommodated now, but I want to make sure that the seawall work can support that additional load for an elevated Harbor Walk.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. Okay, Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Thank you, Chair Parker. We did not have anything further to add. We just wanted to note that we conducted a site visit on January 30th, and as far as timing goes, the project was initially scheduled to be on an earlier hearing date, but ran into an abutters notice delay, so it's on today's hearing agenda instead. And the materials that were referenced are available in the dry folder for the commission to review if they so desire.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, so by taking these borings, does that assume that you're going to have to rebuild this entire wall in order to raise the elevation, et cetera? Do you look forward that that's what's going to have to happen?
Right now, one of the preferred alternative at the moment, pending our geotechnical review, is to replace the seawall with a revetment. But we are still in the design phase, and the geotech will advance, any number of alternatives that we are pursuing.
Yeah. All right. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Linay?
For the underwater borings, is there any consideration for a turbidity curtain, or is that necessary here?
We typically don't see any feedback from DMF. And they did receive the NOI package where they would require a turbidity curtain. They don't consider the borings of this nature to be a silt producing activity like dredging or otherwise. We do monitor turbidity and we could deploy one, if necessary. It's typically not required by DMF or any other organization that's providing input, but we would be ready for that if needed.
Okay, no, thanks for the response. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond,
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Herbst.
No questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I see Cindy Baxter has her hand raised. Cindy?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question and a little bit ahead of what's going on, but relative or related to the design, can any consideration be given to a living seawall? We are actually deploying this in other areas in East Boston, and it would be much welcome forward thinking if Massport and the designers as well as the city can consider a living seawall. And happy to supply any information, but I'm sure you guys are better experts than I am. I'm from Friends of Belle Isle Marsh, by the way. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Chris, any reaction?
Yeah, I know that our real estate staff and some of our capital program staff met with staff from Boston Harbor Now and the Stone Living Lab about a month ago. And so I know as part of that discussion, obviously Stone Living Lab has been promoting, advancing sort of living wall concepts. So, we can look to see to what extent that could be integrated in with this. We do, given the nature of that area, just the coastal dynamics need sort of a harder sort of riprap revetment type solution there. So a true soft solution would not function. We just don't have the real estate, but I'll be happy to look further into that, those types of designs for this.
Thank you. That's much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Just looking to our interpreters, do we have any comments?
It looks like no comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to issue an order of conditions and close the hearing.
And Chair Parker, apologies. I just wanted to clarify, is that with the additional special condition to provide the results of the borings?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Forgot about that.
So moved.
We have a second. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Linay,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And I'll get both right next time. Next item is notice of intent for DEP file number 006-2027 and Boston file number 2025-006 from Epsilon Associates Inc. on behalf of the East Boston Community Development Corporation for the proposed redevelopment of the property with a new residential building, paving, drainage improvements, landscaping, and utility installation at 2 Shawsheen Road and 1150 Saratoga Street in East Boston. Resource areas are land subject to coastal storm flowage and 100-foot buffer to a BVW. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hi, my name is Tanya Hanel. I'm the Deputy Director and the Director of Real Estate at the East Boston Community Development Corporation. I'll be introducing the project and the team that's here to present. And I apologize, this is my first time doing this, so should I be sharing? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. We've got it all set up for you. You just need to talk. Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. So thank you for having us. I've introduced myself, and this is a rendering of the proposed project that we're here to present to you tonight. And I'll go ahead and go to the next slide to introduce the team. These are, some of our wonderful team members. With us tonight is Greg Hotchmuth from Epsilon Associates. He'll be describing the project site and going into more detail about the NOI. We also have with us Shelby Chapman-Hale. We also have Sharon Gentjes. I skipped over our Jerry Squared Design principal architect, who will be presenting as well on the design of the project. And then Shelby Chapman Hale from Offshoots is our landscape architect, who's very important to us on this project. And George Ryan is with us from Stantec. He is our project civil engineer. Next slide. So a brief overview of the project. We are proposing to convert an industrial lot that's bordering the Belle Isle Marsh to create 57 units of affordable housing. 35 of those units are in a affordable rental building on the southern portion of the site. Most of our presentation is going to focus on the 22-unit affordable condominium building that is on the northern portion of the site. We are in the Saratoga Street economic development area. We're just under an acre in East Boston. And we can move to the next slide. So obviously to the East Boston Community Development Corporation, this is a very mission-oriented project. So I did just want to ground us in the two buildings that are proposed and why we're proposing them and who they're serving. So the 22 homeownership units are income targeted to households between 80 and 100% AMI. It's mostly it's to create much needed affordable family housing with these condominiums. So as you can see, the bedroom sizes of the units are skewed quite large to mostly 2, 3, and 4s. We also have the building on the southern portion of the site is 35 rental units. We have a strong need in East Boston for supportive service housing and affordable family housing for those who are anywhere between 0 and 60% AMI. And so we just wanted to provide some background on that. And now I'll turn it over to Greg from Epsilon Associates to ground us in the site itself and its location.
Thank you, Tanya. Good evening, everyone. Greg Hockman from Epsilon Associates. So Epsilon was tasked with identifying jurisdictional resource areas on the site, and we pulled together the NOI working with the team that Tanya mentioned. But just to give you an idea where the site is, so it's north of Constitution Beach. It's where that little red rectangle is. It's just south of the Orient Heights MBTA yard. And it's right next to a CVS for anybody that's driven down Saratoga or to butts that CVS. Next slide, please. This is just an image from MassGIS showing where DEP thinks the wetland resource areas are. They got it pretty close. That green finger-like projection you see touching the yellow rectangle is a BBW system that eventually connects to the Belle Isle Marsh as you head east. This portion of the wetland is a freshwater wetland, obvious toe slope wetland. It looks like it was mechanically dug at one point in time, many, many moons ago, to convey stormwater towards the ocean. Next slide, please.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Greg. While we're on it, might be efficient to talk about the difference in delineation that you've come up with vis-a-vis DEP.
Sure. No, it's actually pretty close to what DEP is mapped. It's just where they show the approximate property line. It's showing a small portion of that green actually on our lot. The wetland falls just east of our lot line. One thing that I'm going to talk about in a minute is a discrepancy that we found in the property boundary, which is why I think you see the line a little off there.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a little bit of an encroachment where we're occupying a portion of 1150 Saratoga, which is where CVS is, but we're going to rectify that as a result of this application. We also have a FEMA zone AE, which is elevation 11 and AVD 88, which is shown here in this magenta color. It's bordering, it's land subject to coastal storm flowage. And as you can see, it splits our lot. And the location, that's pretty close to where it is. Following the topo that we did, it lines up pretty close to that graphic depiction there. Next slide. So the next slide, this is just an aerial photo of what it looked like when the prior owner was occupying the property. It was August Brothers Oil. You can see there's a building in the southern portion of the property. The entire property is almost entirely paved. Where it's not paved, it's compact gravel. The wetland system is in the top right of that yellow rectangle that you see just behind the CVS parking lot. And next slide, please. Next slide. These are just some photos that we took when we did the wetland delineation in May of 2022. August Brothers Oil was still on site, but this should just give you a better idea of what it looked like. The top left image is of the building that currently exists. The bottom right is me standing in the wetland looking out at the Orient Heights MBTA yard to the north, looking at the bank to the BVW system. The bottom middle photo is looking into the wetland towards the ocean, down that finger-like projection that you saw in the prior slides. Next slide, please. So this is just a site preparation plan. You can see on the right, you can see where the existing building is. It's that box that you see. Existing buildings proposed to be removed, most of the fencing. There's a couple utility poles that go down the middle of the site. We're going to try to save as many trees as we can along the rear lot line. I guess it's the property line to the north. Shelby's going to talk about that when she gets into the planting effort. But yeah, fencing, protect the trees to remain. There's overhead wires. There's a current sewer easement that bisects the property. You'll see when we get into the renderings how we're protecting that with planting areas. And then I'm gonna hand it off to our architects on the next slide.
Thank you, Greg. This is Sharon Gentris. I'm with Joy Square Design, the architects on the project. So as Tanya said, the building is going to be condos, home ownership, and it's 3 levels of residential units above a level of structured parking. And I think the thing that is important to know about the way that this is built is that the structured parking is actually raised up above the current grade. And so if you look at that section on the right-hand side, the red is the 3 levels of residential units. The gray is the parking. And then underneath, if you see that sliver of blue, we're creating a floodable space underneath the building to allow the waters to come in and eventually recede. And George is going to talk about how we worked to make sure that the site will accommodate the same amount of water. But if you can see up at the top, that is a foundation plan. The only areas that are backfilled are the mechanical room and the elevator pit, and that was for various reasons, some of them having to do with insulation and the Passive House certification. Everything else will be open. Next slide, please.
Before you go on, could I just clarify that the parking structure of the building is above the 2070 projected floodplain?
The parking structure is not, the lobby is. So the parking structure is at elevation 19 and the lobby is at 21.5.
Okay, thank you.
So from this side, this is the elevation that faces the MBTA yard, and then beyond the MBTA yard, Belle Isle Marsh. And you see down at the bottom, highlighted in orange, those are the openings in the foundation that will allow the water to enter when the waters rise and then flow back out again when the waters go down. And there's a similar set of openings on the left-hand side of the building. So the 2 elevations that face the lowest grades have these openings that allow the floodwater to come in and then to leave. Next slide, please. So this is a view from our central open space, which Shelby is going to talk about. This is the space that has the easement for the sewer underneath it. And so we're creating some recreational space, a rain garden, And on this side, the foundation is not open. So this is the higher end of the site as we're going uphill. And you can see we're talking about working with someone to get a mural as part of the building. And if you see the ramp on that upper rendering, that's how we're getting people up to elevation 21.5, because the sidewalk is down at, I believe, 17. So we have raised the occupied portion, the lobby, up to that 21.5 elevation. Next slide, please. So this is just talking about the sustainable properties of the project. We are going to be Passive House certified, LEED Gold certifiable, and we'll be all electric, and we'll have rooftop photovoltaics. In addition to these things, and you know, there's some water savings programs we're participating in, net zero energy, Energy Star, but we're also doing some things that are specific because of our proximity to the marsh. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to incorporate bird safe glazing. So the glazing will have a pattern etched on the outside that will prevent birds from mistaking it for open sky, mistaking the windows for open sky. Likewise, we're using plantings that are native and are appropriate to the location, creating habitats. We're going to have a rain garden. And to speak about that, I'll turn it over to our landscape architect, Shelby Chapman Hale from Offshoots.
Sharon, thanks for the intro. We'll go to the next slide. So I am the lucky one that gets to think about plantings in this space right by the Belle Isle Marsh. So I'm going to walk you through really quickly our planting approach. So you can see on this colored plan that we are thinking about the site in terms of ecological plant communities and trying to pair native plants throughout the site that will do well in certain conditions and provide different ecological benefits. So in the light green plan north and east next to the MBTA and CVS, we have what we're calling a phyto buffer. As Sharon mentioned, south of the building, we have a large stormwater planting area. In the middle of the site, we have an open space, green lawn area. Around the building, some entry plantings, and then a green streetscape along Shawsheen. So I'm just going to walk you through those really quickly. Happy to take questions later too. So if we go to the next slide. This is just a preview of the species list, of course, all native plants. And within these ecological communities, we're thinking about things like I mentioned, you know, this is near the marsh area. This is going to flood. We want to make sure these are plants that can handle that. But then also thinking through ecological practices, making sure we have a ground cover, a shrub layer, a canopy to create that strong vertical structure, making sure that we have a wildlife value, pollinator value all through their life cycle, all through the year, through the plant choices and the maintenance practices in here. So very, very diverse and sort of there's some overlap and some inspiration, and we'll go through the pictures. If we go to the next slide, we'll start to just show you a little bit of an illustration of what this might sort of start to look like. Trees, of course, that upper vertical structure canopy throughout the site, thinking about those, and they're going to be a diverse, of course, right, diverse pool of trees so that we are creating that diversity there, and all of the wonderful cooling and ecological value that trees provide. Next slide. Trees feel like a no-brainer, right? Next slide, the phyto buffer. So I mentioned this is along the CVS and the MBTA. And we noticed this picture in the top left picture is an existing site photo. As Greg mentioned, we're trying to keep as many of the existing trees as we can. And these are poplar trees, which are trees that have phytoremediation benefits that can potentially clean up contaminants from the soil, and pairing these trees with other phyto trees that can potentially clean particulate matter out of the air and provide urban benefits, but then also providing a habitat buffer thicket. So if we go to the next slide, you can see we're trying to pair these sort of human and ecological benefits together to create something really rich in this zone, really inspired by the plantings of the Belle Isle Marsh and the CZM plant lists to provide this buffer planting. And again, floodable, right? Something that we know is going to see change over time, and really trying to be thoughtful, especially in this area, about what those plants are and how we can support the native seed bank. Next slide. So wrapping around the building, very similar palette, but to slightly different conditions that can handle inundation of stormwater and periods of dry. But again, really trying to think about these spaces and making sure we have our maximum wildlife value throughout the whole year. Next slide. And then entry plantings. So taking those same sort of beautiful Belle Isle Marsh inspiration, right, and distilling it down to something really aesthetically beautiful at the entry and focusing in on pollinators and thinking about how we can support them through the seasons and highlight that a little bit, right, for the community in this open space, what these wonderful plants can do. Next slide. We also wanted to point out that through that central open space in the middle, we are providing minimal planting and minimal site work through a 16-foot wide zone through the site that could be sort of in anticipation of potential future greenway connection through there. So just trying to think ahead for the future in that zone. Next slide. And then lastly, before I hand it over to George to talk about the stormwater a little bit more, we just wanted to mention this courtyard area, which is, the vegetation and the stormwater are framing the view basically from the ends of Barnes Ave and creating this accessible new open space that's going to be teeming with ecological value. Next slide, and I'll hand it over to George.
Okay, quickly before we let you go, Shelby.
Yeah.
That was very thoughtful. Thank you. Quick question on, actually two quick questions. I didn't see anything in the NOI, and I might have missed it, on how many trees you're taking down and how many you're putting back up. So do you have any idea of the replication there? And then as far as like a tree inventory, you generally will see from applicants the health of the trees, like the trees coming down. A lot of times they need to come down because they're dangerous in their current conditions. So do we have any information on that?
I believe in the civil plans in the NOI, there were trees to be protected and to be removed, but we could find out those numbers and get back to you a confirmed quantity. It is more being introduced than removed is my my hunch here, but we can get you a real number.
Okay, and then CZM planting list, and maybe I'll reserve this for when I talk to Ellen after this. So let's go to drainage. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. For the record, George Ryan with Stantec. It's a nice segue into our approach to the grading and drainage plan, by way of the introduction of all this green space that Shelby just described. The project does significantly reduce the impervious area, considering it a redevelopment project, which by way of introducing added green space, you see stormwater benefits for peak rates, volumes, infiltration. The site, as we saw in the introduction, is an industrial site that's completely paved in the current condition, with essentially no stormwater controls to speak of. So when we looked at the site, we wanted to approach it, from TSS removal, adding infiltration. There's certainly also, other local requirements through Boston Water and Sewer that have stormwater requirements kind of above and beyond even what a redevelopment project would consider. And so we worked, very closely with Shelby's team to introduce a bioretention area, which is shown just planned south of the building in this plan. That's going to capture runoff, provide treatment, recharge as much as possible, and the planting palette that Shelby just went through. And so by way of, as I said, introduction of the green space area and the stormwater best management practices that are targeted for pollutant removal, that was our kind of overall theme to the stormwater approach. The drainage patterns and flow are going to be very similar to the existing conditions, with the introduction of the stormwater features. And, again, they're like this second note here speaks about the curve number. That's a reduction, reduces runoff, reduces volume by way of removing impervious area. And the, other very significant consideration was the floatable area under the garage, which Sharon illustrated in the renderings and in the profiles of the building. The requirement for, resiliency, as Sharon mentioned, at 19.5 at the garage and 21.5 at the lobby and habitable areas for the 2070 elevation would have required this building, to be elevated several feet above existing grade, constituting kind of fill and potential displacement of the floodplain. And so what the design has evolved to and proposed as part of this notice is the floatable area underneath the garage that allows floodwaters to come in, use the area underneath the building, which will remain, essentially at existing grade. And then the, building slab is elevated above that to avoid the displacement that would have occurred from raising the building up to those 2070 elevations. And so instead of filling in that area and displacing it, this project proposes to have the floodable kind of void space underneath the building. And those are, really kind of big picture, the site design, grading and drainage considerations. Obviously, relatively small sites. I think we've done a good job making use of the space we have, and Sharon and Shelby's hard work was a key piece in being able to hit the goals that we wanted to. I believe there is potentially another slide for utilities. So I'll quickly touch base on this. There is electric service for the building, proposing to relocate poles outside of that buyer retention area, laterally, planned right to left. And you can kind of see, sanitary service for the building connecting out to barns, some rerouting of drainage work, the 2 transformers in there, pretty typical building connections for utilities that'll utilize public service as you work down Shaw, Sheen, and Barnes Ave.
What's the elevation of the transformer?
The transformer is going to be above the proposed flood elevation. So this plan has 1745 as Boston City base compared to the 11 reference. So same elevation, just different datum. And those pads will be, I believe the bottom of that pad will be about 2 inches above that 1745 elevation.
Okay. Did you have any issues with, I don't know who it is, the utility provider there about repairing, about the height of the transformers and ability to access the transformers for repairs? We've heard that in the past when they've been elevated above the floodplain.
The floodplain is very shallow on this site. And so, I think for all intents and purposes, from maintenance considerations, it's pretty flat. And so we had kept it above that elevation for flood protection, but it's not going to be elevated, above the adjacent sidewalk, above the adjacent access to the building. That slope off is very gradual.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think, I will provide a little wrap up. I just, again, want to thank you for having us. You saw an exclamation point at the end of, we're going to be Passive House certified. So this is the East Boston Community Development Corporation's first Passive House project. We're excited to be net zero and installing solar and, working with our partners to improve our grid in East Boston. We are also, we live in East Boston and our residents live in East Boston, and we are all avid users and avid fans of the Belle Isle Marsh. So we think that this site presents an opportunity to actually clean up and vastly improve a site that, borders an adjacent wetlands to the Belle Isle Marsh. And so, we want to be an example of good, sustainable design and construction that's near a sensitive habitat, and showing, the kind of accommodations that need to be made if we're going to be building in floodplains, which increasingly in East Boston, we are either built out in a floodplain or, having to figure out new ways to approach floodplains and construction. Excuse me. So that's part of the reason why we're working with offshoots, and Stantec and Sharon and her team. Sharon is also a East Boston resident. We both live very coastally. And so, we can imagine that that these storm events happen, right? That George is designing for. And, I've been to some of the landscapes that Offshoots has done 10 years ago and seen how they've grown in and how they actually thrive. And so the thought that goes into that is really important to us because we actually do own and manage our own buildings. So we have our own maintenance team. We continue to own these buildings. We've owned buildings in East Boston for over 30 years. So we are thinking about 50 years into the future in about 2070. And we are on the hook to maintain this site in impeccable condition, the same way that we do have a good reputation for our landscape maintenance and our site maintenance. And so we look forward to actually partnering with the Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh on this landscape and on this site, and keeping it clean of pet waste, and making sure that anything that nothing is blowing into the nearby wetlands. There's so much trash there that needs to be cleaned up. But our maintenance team is very aggressive about our curb appeal and our cleanliness, and including, I just want to say, our trash, that comes with residential buildings, is really important. And you can ask anybody who lives in East Boston how important your trash plan and pickup and maintenance is. So we are focused on those at all our buildings, but in particular when we're building near a sensitive habitat. So with that, I will turn it over for questions or comments.
Fantastic, thank you. So Tanya, I think this is one of the most thoughtful projects that's come in front of us. You and your team have put a lot into this. You should all be very proud of the product here. I have no doubt that when you look back after construction for many years to come, you'll look at this with a sense of pride. That said, we have a lot of questions because of the proximity of the salt marsh. And before we get into that, I just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. So a couple questions for me. And I think everybody on the commission and staff are going to have a lot for you. So one thing that I focused on is the August Oil Company. I assume this is a 21E site. I assume you've done some environmental investigations here, but when you actually do the excavations for the foundations and all that, you're going to learn a lot more about the site. So we would like to have any reports that you file with DEP, if you could make sure they make their way to staff. I know it'll be public record, but it would be better if staff got notice or got these reports themselves. The other thing is, if you run into a situation where you are have to stop work because you have, what's called quote unquote an imminent hazard or something that just needs investigation by an LSP, we would put in the order of conditions that you'll let staff know about that. And Shelby, I was able to find the plan sheets with the tree information. So thank you. I think we'd like to see maybe that summarized in a separate document, a one-pager or whatever, so that we have that information pretty handy. The last thing I had was, Shelby, you mentioned something about the CZM list. And I guess I go to Elena on this. Is CZM list, because I'm just not familiar with it, does it comport with the list that we usually require as a commission?
I could answer that. I think we got inspiration from CZM lists in our own coastal experience, but we did check on our end all plants against USDA or the Mass Vascular Plant List. And so that was one question. We have all Massachusetts native. There were 3 plants that are not Suffolk native. So those 3 plants can be removed if you guys want it to the county level, or if you're okay with Massachusetts, but we're pretty darn close, I think, on what you're looking for there.
Okay, so quick question on that. Are you, I know we've talked in the past when we have robust landscaping plans like this about the way that vegetation is creeping up zones with climate change.
Yep.
Did that go into your thinking for your plan? And if so, what plants did you spell out or whatever?
That's a great question. In this particular case, because we're looking so coastally focused, we have kept it Massachusetts local. It is definitely something that we think about, and typically we'll think, sort of Atlantic, sort of like that just a couple of zones south. But I think in this case we're okay with Massachusetts, unless there's concern on your end.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I will let others get to it. Elena, what do you have on this?
Thank you, Chair Parker. We did not have anything to add other than what was already mentioned. We conducted a site visit on February 13th and were able to see the site, and it was I feel like that was extremely informative, and I think the renderings and the other graphics that have been shared during the presentation do a good job of depicting the site.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
For the bioswale or whatever you're building there for the stormwater, is that taking both the condos and the apartments? Is that all taking both of them?
That is, we are considering as part of the rentals, additional stormwater to meet kind of Boston water and sewer requirements, but this, bioretention area is sized for the targeted pollutant removal that we're going to need for the site.
Right, but that will hold an inch, correct?
Yes.
Water. Or actually, it might have to be 1.25 inches. I'm not sure.
It is 1.25 inches.
Well, good for you. So that whole area, that's a 9-foot MWRA sewer easement, 50-foot wide sewer easement. Have you spoken to them about putting on top of their sewer, a pond?
We have the 8M permit will need to be approved by them, and that area is predominantly paved now, and so that's part of the intention to keep that accessible, and we are kind of discussing that with them. Generally speaking, they won't have restricted access. They'll still be able to access the pipe, and if at any point in time that needs to happen, that the stormwater feature is just outside the limits of the actual pipe itself. So the easement is very large in width compared to the actual size of the pipe.
Right. At high tides in the future, are they going to be coming under the building? I wasn't paying attention to the elevations yet, but the high tides that we're going to get on a daily basis, they're going to be washing in and out under the building, or is that just storm water?
No, that is for floodwaters. So depending on the flood elevation, some portion of the building may have water flowing in and out of it. And then, as it's kind of sized for the 100 event, when that 100-year event comes through and you see that kind of rise in your water levels, then the entirety of the area would be used.
Right. And how do you make sure of, and I'm not sure if people are going to be littering there, but, how do you make sure the whole area is cleaned up behind the building, from your site all the way to any of the wetlands, the Belle Isle Marsh?
Is that a question separate from the flooding and stormwater?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let Tanya can do that.
Yeah, it's a good question. We so part of what we didn't highlight too much is the encroachment. So our project site, the fence that goes around our project site along the eastern border, which is the one that borders the wetlands, is actually 10 feet further back from our sight line. So we have 10 feet that's actually kind of owned by the CVS owners. And so they've agreed to allow us to extend the phyto buffer into that portion of the site or of their land, and clean up that portion of their land. But behind the fence line, we don't have access other than just the access that the Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh probably get when they do their cleanups. So our job is really focused on preventing any trash from our site, extending beyond the fence line.
Yeah.
So towards that end, we do have actual exterior. We put in waste baskets actually, and we plan to have waste baskets and in that central courtyard area, and our maintenance staff empties those waste baskets and maintains them, not the city.
Right. In the CVS parking lot, I think their private drainage system discharges right against where your property is, in the back of the property. So have you got an agreement with them if the trash and debris from their property gets out there, it's like whose trash is this and who's gonna pick all that up? Have you talked
Yeah,
to
I
them
mean,
about that?
You know, we just plan on, we're not going to be moving the fence as part of this project or adding a new fence inland of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're planning on just maintaining up to the fence line, whether it's our phyto buffer or their phyto buffer. So, you know, we plan on just keeping all of that area clear of trash.
All right, that's all I had. Mr. Chairman, I'm done. Kaput's done.
Sorry, I was muted. Commissioner Linay.
I was curious to know a little bit more about the phyto buffer. And specifically, I'm guessing that it's there to address the hydrocarbons on the site, but is there any concern that those plants are taking that up, and particularly the forbs, you know, are they at risk of sort of somehow, you know, migrating into the wetland? And then curious about sort of the maintenance of that. Is there sort of a protocol for refreshing those planting beds and replacing the plants every so often?
That's a great question, and I wish Kate Kennan was here because she's our resident expert on phytoremediation, but I can speak to what I know and get you more answers. The idea is that we're using it as a redundancy, not as the intended way to clean anything, but as maybe there might be something here. Can we provide extra protection for the wetland by providing that phyto buffer as a first line of defense, or maybe a last line of defense, either way. And so the idea there is that we would be using those species, and that we would be planting essentially smaller future canopy species because they're somewhat short-lived, so that the site has its own sort of ecological succession built into it from the start. I'd have to talk to Kate to get sort of the more maintenance specific part of that. We could do that.
Commissioner Linay, if it helps you at all, I've worked on sites where we have employed phyto remediation, and I think Shelby explained it very well. You don't rely on it as the primary remediation. It's more of a, it's a redundancy, I think is what Shelby characterized it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions about the level of the garage. Is there a reason why you didn't want to bring it all the way up to the same level as the first floor?
Yeah,
I was going to say, Sharon, you want to take that?
Yeah, it really, the main reason was the length of the ramp that would be needed. With the sidewalk down at 17, it really wasn't feasible. The ramp would have taken up, you know, most of the garage. So we managed to make the ramp reasonably at a reasonable pitch, reasonable steepness in order to get it up to the 19.5. But that was as high as we could go.
And what happens when you get that flood? I mean, what is the floodplain in 2070 at that location?
21.5.
And I mean, you're going to have cars in there, right?
There will be cars in there. Yeah.
And are there also kind of storage bins or anything else that's on the level of the garage?
So the trash is actually exterior. I guess, George, if you want to speak to that a little bit, but my layman's understanding is that if the floodwaters are that high, you know, the street would really be flooded as well. And so it isn't, you know, so cars in general are going to be very much in trouble at that point in time. But go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, so that is the 2070 flood elevation. And so the difference between the two, as Sharon mentioned, was for access into the building, the garage. And all of like the key components of the building's system, like your habitable space, your lobby, your mailroom, like that's all at 21.5. So yes, in the 2070, projected elevation, there could be a chance of water at the garage just based on the elevation difference between the two. And even that's 2 feet higher than the current flood elevation to 19.5, 4 feet to 21.5. So yeah, a lot of the areas in Boston as currently constructed will be inundated with water in that 2070 elevation.
Yeah, I mean, I should say this, and I meant to say it at the very beginning. I really echo what the chairman said about how much I think this is such an important project, and how much I think it's wonderful that it's being built. But having said that, it seems to me that if you know that it's likely to be an area that's going to be flooded in 2070, and you're going to be building it to last for as long as was suggested, it doesn't, I think from my point of view, it should be higher. And I understand what was just said about the ramp to the garage, but in addition to the cars, I guess I was also asking what else is at that level. I think somebody talked about where the utilities were, and I was a little confused. Are those above this level as well?
Yeah, the utility room is up at 21.5.
Okay. And so the only thing that would be at the garage level would be cars, is that right?
Yeah, cars and bicycles.
And nothing else?
No, there's nothing else at that level.
Okay. All right. Well, I wish you guys tremendous luck with this, and thank you for answering my questions.
Great, thank you. I'll just make one note. Someone I think on the project team said that there would be cars in the garage in 2070. And frankly, I'm not sure there'll be cars in the garage in 2070.
You just echoed exactly.
Oh, sort of interesting. Commissioner Herbst.
I just had a question. I'm not sure that it ultimately matters that much, but your project talked about providing compensatory flood storage, and that isn't required or expected in a land subject to coastal storm flowage. So I was just curious how that affected your project, or would you be thinking about it differently if you weren't thinking of that as something you needed to provide, or whether, I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
I can take that one if you want, Tanya.
That would be great. Thank you, Greg.
Sure. Yeah, so when this was a redevelopment project, we needed to comply with the ordinance. You're correct. Land subject to coastal storm flowage at the state level doesn't mean much yet, but it's going to very soon. But certainly in the ordinance, it does. And one of the things we needed to be able to do was show the board that there's going to be an improvement over existing conditions.
Yep.
And one of those things we were able to do was to actually increase the flood storage on the site. So providing compensatory flood storage under the building just made sense for all the reasons we've talked about tonight, and to be able to show the commission that we're doing better here. Okay. And one thing I forgot to mention was post-construction, there's going to be 8,400 square feet less impervious on this site, which I think is pretty impressive too, considering the lot itself is a little over 37,000 square feet. So that's a pretty big number. So yeah, that's really why we did it. We didn't technically have to provide compensatory flood storage, but we were able to, so we did.
Thank you very much. It's an exciting project.
Great, thank you. Okay, I see 2 hands up. I think Gail first.
Yes, thanks for calling on me. Gail Miller with Friends of Belle Isle, of course. Longstanding member of that August body. I just have a couple of questions, and I may have missed it, so I apologize, but does the stormwater capture, does that somehow include the groundwater that, is gonna maybe, butt up against the stormwater? I mean, because water doesn't really have too many places to go. So if we're overtopping the site and we're dealing with, groundwater, how is that working? I'm just not getting it in my own head.
Is that you, Greg? For you?
Probably might be for George.
Probably George.
Yeah. So the stormwater, right? So by way of the introduction of the added green space area, the runoff from this site is going to be, much better just with the green space. And then the pollutant, like the bioretention areas, are sized for your first basically inch of runoff, not only like from local requirements, but also what's kind of considered to be your kind of first flush of pollutants. And so at those lower storm events, you get your treatment of your pollutants through like your first inch. And that's where like a large majority of your pollutant removal comes from. And so when you have inundation of water from groundwater or any other of these sources, you're dealing with you're talking more about your several inches of rainfall, not your first inch of most kind of common storms. So we've sized this for your kind of common storm events that flush out the pollutants.
Okay, thank you. Gail, anything else?
Yeah, I'll try to be very quick. I think and I just want to say overall, we would never probably support a project that was being built in the floodplains. But on the other hand, we've had, a number of conversations with the developers, and they've been very sensitive, as we can see here in their presentation tonight, of I think a huge overall sensitivity to the marsh. And of course, that's our goal, to protect the marsh. But I was wondering if I can't remember if Tanya said you would commit to some environmental signage around the area so that people walking could really appreciate what was in their midst.
We would love to. Yeah, we would love to. We would love to partner with you guys on that, Gail.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. And then
especially just so that people know, because it's not immediately obvious that the edge of this neighborhood with, the MBTA lot and the CVS parking lot is actually a transition to the Belle Isle Marsh. And so I think some signage might go a long way to educating people about that.
Yeah, for sure. To Commissioner Sullivan's question about the trash, that's been an ongoing problem. CVS, these are tenants of the Lombardo family, and they've not been very good about dealing with their trash, even though you might see a dumpster back there. It's the site of, many cleanups, and we actually got mitigation monies to do cleanups because of that fact. But to the credit of the Lombardo family, they have put up a fence, so that really now captures a lot better of the trash going into the marsh. But regardless, in the back, that's where it accumulates, gathers. There's, the water runs down in the back of the building. And so it has been a constant problem. I'm not suggesting this new project is going to be having to be responsible for that, but it is a constant annoyance for us. And then the other thing was, with regard to the vegetation, will there be an obvious, look-see as to whether or not these are really getting a foothold in the area, and will they be replaced? Should they not be thriving? That's always a concern, I think.
Yep, Gail, we will have that in the order of conditions. We have, that's standard.
Okay, that's great. I think that's really all I have. But one other question that I had was, is the 21E certificate optional in this situation?
I'm not, maybe I could handle that. Not sure what you're talking about as far as the certificate, but they will be reporting to DEP during construction and after construction. I imagine, Tanya, you're going to have to place an AUL on the property for residential use, or maybe I'm mistaken.
So maybe Greg is better to speak to this because it's a little more technical. I can tell you that right now we don't have an AUL on the property. And our phase 1 and our phase 2, from an environmental perspective, everything we've found has been characterized as urban fill.
Good.
So that's good news. I do hear you about, having in the order of conditions, if anything comes up during construction, because sometimes things do. And so we'll have an LSP, of course, but we'll make sure that our LSP is communicating with you guys as well as, the DEP.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's, Cindy, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. And I'll be quick. I see many people in line. As Gail has mentioned, and again, I'm from Friends of Belle Isle Marsh. As Gail has mentioned, I'd like to say up front that Friends of Belle Isle Marsh is supportive of this project. And we have provided written testimony and want the public to be aware that based on research we did, site visits, and work with the project team, there are a number of things that this project team is doing that make us feel positive about the ecological impact of the wetlands, especially in an EDA, i.e. economic development area, which is what the city of Boston has designated to Shawshing Road. That said, we are hopeful that the order of conditions can include 4 key items. The first and perhaps alluded to a little bit, but not talked about directly, is the NOI is constructed around half of the project, not the whole of the project. And given concerns about stormwater and runoff, and it's hard to divide water in half. And certainly that's what we've been talking about as we go through the design. We would love to see the order of conditions include the 67,000 square feet versus the 36,000 square feet that's mentioned in the NOI. 67,000 comes from the BPDA assessment when they approved the project. So that's one item that we're hoping to see in the order of conditions. We've already talked about the border of the vegetated wetlands, the BVW, and we've already heard about the ongoing maintenance. So we're pleased to hear that not only will Friends of Belle Isle Marsh be part of that, but the due diligence that the commissioners have requested regarding maintenance and, if you will, continuity, that's not the right word, but making sure that things don't die in 5 years is very important to us. And we're pleased to see that commitment is most likely going to appear in the order of conditions. And then we also want to, we've also talked about the 21E, so I'm not going to bring that up again. Some of the positives that we want to point out, I separately write for a technical journal. I want to highlight that a lot of research that we've done on Passive House is pretty impressive. So for them to be including Passive House, which is not a requirement, is what we feel being very progressive and potentially a huge role model for what we want to do in Boston. So I want to highlight that on behalf of Friends of Belle Isle Marsh. We're grateful for the 8,400 square feet being returned to permeable. And we're looking forward to contributing to the discussion on the native species. I think that really summarizes it for me. And of course, if the public, anybody in the public standing here, I know there are a lot of participants, is interested in seeing our full testimony, we would be happy to provide it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Just want to note, nice try on the condition number 1 there, but unfortunately, we can't include non-jurisdictional areas in our orders of conditions because it would have no legal effect. And I think everything else you raised, we do have in our order of conditions, perpetual maintenance conditions. The maintenance conditions actually will follow, as I said, in perpetuity. So when the applicant comes to get a completion, certification of completion for the project, we will include those maintenance conditions as a condition to issuing the COC. So I think covered there. Okay, thank you.
We're very grateful. Thank you again.
Welcome. Thank you. Christine?
Good evening. Thank you very much. First, I wanted to say that I have to agree with both Cindy and Gail that Tanya and her team have been very willing to meet with the abutters and the different groups in the area. They have been very supportive of have listened to our concerns and our ideas. They have made changes that we've requested and suggested. They're probably the most easy to deal with developer that the city has had in a long time. They care about the neighborhood. They care about the other residents. They care about what they're developing and what they're doing, which makes me, I won't say support this project because it's right at the end of my street and it's going to change my life drastically, but it makes me feel better about what's going there than some of the other projects that have gone into the area of Orion Heights. My only concern and the concern of other people, other abutters, is what is going to happen to those properties that are right there in the floodplain and how they can be affected. I know the development is going to have all this wonderful stuff to prevent the flooding, but how will that water and the development of the area affect the properties that abut that? And is that being taken into consideration and being looked at? And that's our big concern. But we're very happy with Tanya and her group and how they're developing this project.
Okay, fantastic. Great question, Christine. And that is something that we do consider. So I think back to Greg, would you like to take that question regarding impact on abutters?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. So when this project was being designed, it's hard to believe it when you look at this rendering, but there's actually going to be more flood storage available post-construction than exists today. And that's being accomplished by regrading the site and providing that floodable crawl space underneath the building. So I always try to explain it like putting an ice cube in a bowl of soup. You need to find a spot for that soup to go when you're putting the ice cube in. In this case, that spot is underneath our building. So we're not going to be pushing flood water onto abutting properties. And as George described in his stormwater model, there's actually a decrease in stormwater that's flowing to the design point, which in this case is the wetland system down in the northeast corner of the property, post-construction, just by incorporating more green space and the stormwater management area in between the two buildings.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Commissioner Herbst, looks like you're up for a second round.
Just for a quick comment about the other stormwater management that's not in our jurisdiction. I just wanted to note that it doesn't escape the jurisdiction of the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and that perhaps Commissioner Sullivan might want to speak to that, but they'll have to meet their standards, which are pretty rigorous.
It's a good point. Thank you. Okay, I thought I saw 4 hands, but I think the last one might have dropped off. Elena, do you see anything else, or did you get any emails?
No, I don't see anything else. We had that letter, which Cindy Baxter referred to, which is in the drive folder for the commission's review, but other than that, we haven't received any public comments.
Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to issue the order of conditions with the following special conditions regarding the 21E reporting, the maintenance conditions. I have to flip my page. 21E, the tree inventory before construction. I think we'd want to see that more details on the tree removals. I'm sure you did it very thoughtfully, but we'd like to have that in the files. And one thing I was going to say about the signage, Elena, or I guess direct this to the project team as well. I think staff should be involved in any discussions on signage, because we're always been talking and trying to work towards signage at a lot of our more prominent projects and to design something standardized throughout the city. So it's easily recognizable. I guess it's the branding of the wetlands in Boston, if you can be involved in those conversations. So do we have a motion? Go ahead.
So moved.
Oh, apologies.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Elena, before we go.
And just really quickly, I just want to make sure that we had closed the loop on the special condition about stormwater runoff.
Yes, I think Yeah, so that was something that we had talked about. So I think the expectation here is two things. One, actually, let me ask you what your expectation is first before I go on.
Absolutely, yes. So, the note about special condition, formerly 90 at this point might be a different number in the draft, is about stormwater runoff directed to a construction post, or excuse me, it's about post-construction stormwater. And then the question was also what is happening to the stormwater during construction. So I think that to sort of make things easier, I think that we would maybe prefer to see a plan for stormwater management during construction, sign off on that before anything is actually directed anywhere, and then also sign off on what the stormwater management plan is for post-construction.
Okay. Okay. Because again, as I read that condition, when you pointed it out to me, it only seemed to have a post-construction obligation. So we can change that condition to reflect both during and after. Okay, I heard,
Yeah, do you want me to remake the motion, Mr. Chair?
no, I think we're good.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Linay,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Carries 5-0. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night. Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for DEP file number 006-2038 and Boston file number 2025-077 from Goddard Consulting LLC on behalf of the AD Group Company for the proposed construction of an apartment building with an associated parking lot, utility lines, and a stormwater management system at 586 to 598 Canterbury Street in Roslindale. Resource areas, 25-foot riverfront area, 25-foot waterfront area, and 100-foot buffer to bank. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
My name's Tom Schutz from Goddard Consulting, here on behalf of the applicant, Andreas, who's here from the AD Group, who is the applicant and the owner of the property. We also have Kevin from Boston Civil, who is the civil engineer for the site.
Great. Floor is yours.
Awesome. So we just have a brief presentation for you. Again, this is the 586 through 598 Canterbury Street, and this is for the AD Group. It did get a DEP file number, and that is 006-2028. Comments were minimal on that. Again, Tom Schutz from Goddard Consulting. We also have Boston Civil, who is the civil engineer for the property, who designed the stormwater management and associated parking and all of that good stuff. So we'll move on to the next slide. So this is the agenda. We'll give a brief introduction for the project and existing conditions. We'll then move on to proposed conditions, an invasive species management plan, which hasn't been submitted yet, but we'll discuss briefly, and then we'll follow up with some questions and discussion for the project. Next. So here is an existing conditions aerial of the site. It is turned on its side right now, so north is actually more towards the left, and then south is on the right side of the screen as we look at the aerial. Canterbury Street runs the property to the north of the site, and then we have the American Legion Highway, which borders the southern portion of the site itself. This is 3 different parcels made up of this is 586, 594, and 598 Canterbury Street. This is heavily disturbed. It was previously developed with a parking lot, which now I believe has been ripped up. It's impervious surfaces and water is just kind of running about during storm events. It's hardly vegetated. Most of the vegetation on the site is invasive trees and shrubs. These trees are mostly Norway maples. Of the 21 trees on the site, 20 of them are Norway maple invasives. It's bordered to the east by an apartment building, to the south, or sorry, to the west by a car wash and another apartment building. And then again, we have the highway and Canterbury Street to the south and north, respectively. We can move on to the next slide. We will now talk about some resource areas on the site. So we have Canterbury Brook, which is in the southern portion of the site, which is colored in blue on this. From there, we have the 25-foot waterfront area, which is the reddish color. We also have the 25-foot waterfront area under the Boston ordinance, which is orange, and then the 100-foot buffer zone to bank, which is the tan color, and that reaches all the way back to the mean annual high water of Canterbury Brook itself. There is a 100-year flood line, which is located just to the southwest of the site, and it is demarcated in that black kind of dotted line there. The rest of it, again, mostly unvegetated. There's a driveway that enters the site from Canterbury Street to the northwest. And again, most of the trees actually lie within the 100-foot buffer zone, 25-foot waterfront area, and the 25-foot riverfront area. But again, mostly all invasives. So we'll move on to the next one. So I'll give a brief project description and then I'll hand it over to Kevin, who will then describe the stormwater management and the other engineering infrastructure on the site itself. So the applicant proposes to build a 4-story, 46-unit apartment building with a footprint about 45,600 square feet. That is going to be outside of the buffer zone up in the northern portion of the site itself. That will have associated parking and infrastructure. This is also going to have a green space down to the southwest of the building itself, with all pervious. There's going to be the only section of area that's going to be actually within the buffer zone is a small portion of the parking lot, which can be seen highlighted in the tan area. That's in the 100-foot buffer zone. And then we have a outfall for our stormwater management system within the 25-foot waterfront area. We currently have no actual impact to the 25-foot riverfront area itself. It's mostly just a steep hill, which is the bank of the stream itself. We're going to be doing a full planting plan, which was submitted with the application. We're going to be cutting down 8 trees. Again, all of those except one are invasive Norway maples. We're going to be replacing those with 41 trees and shrubs. Of those, the trees are going to consist of dogwood, tupelo, white oak, and then abrevieties, and then 158 shrubs consisting of dogwood. We have holly, inkberry, mountain laurel, rhododendron, and maple leaf viburnum. We have a snow storage area, which is down within the parking lot itself. It's the small cutout just to the west of or southwest of the building itself. And Kevin can point that out too when he gets onto it. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kevin from Boston Civil to describe the rest of the stormwater management system on site.
Thanks, Tom, and it's a pleasure to meet everyone. Looking forward to submitting or presenting this to everybody. So the existing, actually, Mike.
You mind just go back to the other slide, please? Thank you.
So yeah, the existing site runoff currently all drains to the Scrub-a-Dub car wash there. You know, obviously that wasn't a condition we wanted to maintain, or there wasn't really a practical discharge point to, you know, keep that condition as is. So you'll see about at the center of the site, there's a catch basin, which has a drainage area everywhere on the page at the left, that has a outlet control structure that drains to a 15-inch drain main in Canterbury Street, which eventually does make its way down through Canterbury Street and connects to the same intermittent stream that, or perennial stream, sorry, downstream. So we kind of thought that was a logical, just a way to look at it as one parcel pre-post. So we conservatively modeled this as soil group A in poor condition. You know, as Tom noted, it was previously disturbed. We did have 2 separate soil tests or geotech reports because the property had been looked at previously in a few different ways. And we did end up getting another geotech report that was, you know, with borings actually within our footprint of the systems. So essentially that, just based on the orientation of the building, would have on the west side or north side, sorry, one system behind the building and then one at the front, which, you know, manages the runoff and before, so we can still meet our pre-post to beat Boston Water Sewer submission standards, which has been submitted. You know, it hasn't been reviewed yet, and we'll obviously continue coordinating with them. But then on the on the south side of the site, we have about 7,300 square feet or so of parking lot area that is draining to the southeast corner of the lot, which has a catch basin with a 4-foot sump and hood. And it has about 40 Coltech C100 chambers, which is about 1.5 inches of storage. And we used a conservative Rawls rate for our infiltration design, you know, because there is a presence of fill with debris and glass and plastic. We wanted to use a conservative rate, replace some of that fill with clean fill. And then that discharge point you'll see is it's a little small on the plan, but it's a an area drain that's surrounded in crushed stone that would act as like a bubble up drain, which, you know, there's a few ways we could go about that. We didn't really want to directly connect it into the riverfront area. But on the neighboring property, after researching some BWC record plans, that there is actually an 18-inch drain there. So for anything over the 2-year storm event, that's where the discharge we're proposing would go, which, you know, is basically where that water would be going in that condition. So it seemed like a logical approach on our end. It hasn't been reviewed by the Boston Water and Sewer Commission yet, but that's kind of where we're at this point. You know, it's, like I said, conservative infiltration rate. I think we had originally also had a longer driveway with more parking spaces, trimmed that back a little bit. And one other comment I know that came up in the last couple days was just the presence of compact parking spaces, which, you know, could reduce about 6 inches per space. But we did have a transportation consultant on the team early on the project who brought up the point of just compact spaces being farther away from the building. They're just not utilized as well because, you know, a smaller vehicle wouldn't choose to park in that location if there was a space closer. So, but in our opinion, it more increases the likelihood of taking up multiple spaces if a larger vehicle were to park there. So that was kind of our logic of kind of keeping them standard size spaces. And obviously there's parking counts to be met and things that Andreas could probably speak better to. But, you know, happy to answer any questions on the stormwater design.
Okay, you know. Good, thank you. Since you brought up the parking spaces, the parking is very close to our waterfront area, too close for comfort for us. Based on discussions we've had with other projects. So while I sympathize with the utilization of the parking spaces, I think there's probably some creative ways to make sure that compact cars find their way to compact cars. Are these going to be apartments, condominiums?
They're going to be apartments.
Yeah, so you would have rules and regulations, just like any other building, about where people need to park. So I hate to say it, that's not very compelling to me. The other issue here is the standard spaces. I think you have them in at 8.5 feet. The width, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. Someone had mentioned that those could also be shrunk to 8 feet. Was there any discussion on that?
There hadn't been, but, you know, we could certainly look into it and revise it.
Okay, because at some point, I mean, I'm going to be very frank with you, at some point, we're going to want to see the parking moved further away from the waterfront area. And I was going to say that later, but since you brought it up, I figured we get it out. Okay. Tom, what's next?
Yeah, we'll just continue on. We just have a chart of our disturbances, and then we'll briefly talk about the invasive species management. So this is a chart of the buffer zone and the wetland resource areas. So as you can see, we have 1,000 square feet of riverfront area with 0 proposed impacts. Of the total waterfront area on the site, we're only going to be impacting around 92 square feet. And then we have about 2,391 square feet of the impact to the buffer zone, which would be primarily the parking lot and the retaining wall surrounding the lot itself. So for the next slide, we haven't submitted a formal invasive species management and planting plan, but I thought it would be a good idea to review it tonight and get some input before we actually submitted something to the commission and got some comment and question on it. So we're going to be doing a invasive species management plan for some of the Japanese knotweed and multiflora rose, and also some of the Norway maple saplings that exist within the 25-foot waterfront area. I'm going to be replacing those with 30 native plantings, which are going to consist of upland species that would be suited for the habitat that the 25-foot waterfront in this case consists of. So we're going to have 11 hazelnuts, 10 high bush or low bush blueberries, and then also 9 witch hazels, which would replace the area of shrubs taken up by invasives and replace those with natives that can be found without the throughout the region, and make that more of a wildlife habitat, and also be used by pollinators and small birds and things like that. So make it a little bit nicer of an area than it currently stands today, because right now it's hardly vegetated and again mostly invasive. So this would be a nice native planting area adjacent to the Canterbury Brook. So I think that would do it for us. We would take comments and questions about the project itself. If you have any questions for me regarding the perennial stream, the wetland delineation, the I guess impact to resource area, those questions would be directed to me. Anything regarding the stormwater would be directed to Kevin, and then anything regarding the building or the infrastructure that me and Kevin might not know can go to Andreas. So we'd be
Okay.
happy to field those now.
Great, thank you. Okay, we are definitely going to want an invasive species management plan in the file.
Absolutely.
Okay, Eleanor, what do you have on this?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So we've conducted a site visit last week, and it was definitely helpful to see the site. So some of the questions that I think commission staff still had are have been touched on during the presentation, but I just wanted some clarification. So for the parking spaces, I just wanted to note that I believe it's possible to reduce the size of a standard parking space from 8.5 feet to 8 feet. And the number of parking spaces, I believe, that can be compact in a parking lot zone for this area can be up to 25% of the parking spaces on the site. So we just recommend bumping that up from the proposed 3 compact spaces to 8 compact spaces. For the restoration and invasives management plan for the bank, I think it would also be helpful to know whether your team has hired someone who is sort of well-versed in this work. I think that the bank is definitely an interesting resource area. There's a lot of bank restoration work that's happening nearby. So this project site is directly downstream from bank restoration work that's in progress, and it's also upstream from 2 project sites, which the commission has recently permitted, which are going to be conducting bank restoration work in the near future. So I think that our priority would just be to make sure that any work that's happening on the bank is also sort of contributing to the overall health of the bank in the area. And let's see, seeing if we had any other notes. I think I know that we touched on the stormwater management plan, but I guess something that I'm not 100% clear on is how the proposed retaining wall and the associated grading and fill is going to impact stormwater that's running potentially from where the parking area is down into the brook.
So we haven't done a cut fill yet. We can if that's a requirement. But the it would all be curbed in. So with that catch basin at the corner, it would all go to the system. I hope I mentioned this earlier, but it really wouldn't overflow out of that drain until the 2-year storm event or greater. So the intent is to kind of bring that away from the riverfront area, kind of put it closer to the property line where that drain is, and it would just bubble off from there. We could add extra stone if needed, but just kind of we didn't want to propose too much work in the the closest 50 feet. So
Okay, yeah, that's helpful to know. And then I think that my last 2 questions. So the first question is related to the roof, and I'm wondering if a green roof, and apologies if I missed this in the presentation, if a green roof or at least a light colored roof has been considered for the site for heat resilience purposes.
Yeah, the roof is going to be white.
Great. Okay. And then last question is just wondering, where, or I guess, yeah, if there are any areas on site where pervious pavers could be used, or if there are any areas that are proposed to be paved that could not be paved. I think with other similar projects, we've seen maybe like the paths near the parking lot be pervious pavers instead of being paved. And I think that there might be like a little seating area next to the building, and I'm just wondering if that could be pervious, just seeing what opportunities there are on the site.
Yes, we plan to do that. So all of the we don't have a landscaping plan in this presentation, but all of the paths around the building are going to be permeable pavers. Then there actually, if you could go back a couple of slides in the presentation to the one before that. Thank you so much. Yeah, where you see the snowbank area there, snow storage area there, that'll be permeable pavers. And then right behind the building, there is going to be a seating area that is shaded by trees. That is going to be permeable paver. And also the entire parking area going, towards the stream is going to be broken up with certain paths with permeable pavers. We spent a lot of time with the BPDA during pre-file to show that.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, we hadn't, just for the purposes of the submission, didn't have a clean coordinated landscape base. So that's now in our files. It just wasn't presentable at the time when we had submitted. So, and then just a bit more to comment on that on the street side, there's some permeable pavers as well. And then just where, those islands are between the parking spaces or where the landscape architect is proposing those. And we're not factoring that into our stormwater design. And we have a operations and maintenance plan that's, in draft form that was submitted, but, we're not taking credit for any of that either. We're just kind of assuming it, would be clogged, and we don't want to try to get credit for that either. We'll obviously propose it, but
That's helpful.
in terms of a stormwater volume standpoint, yeah.
So I think for the permeable pavers that are already being suggested on site, Chair Parker, I'd maybe recommend just having an added condition that requires some sort of maintenance plan being submitted to commission staff for how the areas with the permeable pavers will be maintained.
Yeah, what we usually do on that, and I don't know if it's Andreas is taking care of that. What we usually do on that is get the manufacturer's specs. I think that they provide you that information as how to maintain and clean the pavers, because we don't want to see them get filled in and basically become non-functioning. So that is something that we've requested. That's generally the way that we've requested that information, because the manufacturing specs seem to be the best.
Yeah.
But I'll let others weigh in on it if they have a different idea. Okay. Anything else, Eleanor?
No, that's my list. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, in the area for snow storage, how much snow can you store there? That's a fairly large parking lot.
I believe it's 15 by 10 right now. So
yeah, did you figure out if it snows a foot, you got enough room, or you just lose some parking spaces for a while? I'm just curious if anybody.
We did keep the aisles a little bit wider than what we expected. And for that same transportation consultant who kind of gave us the direction on the parking spaces, he mentioned that just having the wider aisles could allow some storage along the runs, and still allow the cars to back up. I haven't run any calculations myself on that, but could certainly provide if more information is needed.
Well, you say snow storage when you're snowing out. The guy with the plow does what he wants. We just want to make sure he doesn't come down and push it all down towards the riverfront.
Yeah,
that's if I were plowing that, I know I'd put it all. So we got to make sure you pick it up and put it where it doesn't impact the resource area there.
Mm-hmm.
The when you have that drainage infiltration system and then the overflow, you're spilling into a 5 by 10 area of rock. How do you keep that when it's overflowing, as it wants to head to the Canterbury? How do you keep it from forming a gully? Can you spread it out further?
It's kind of it's just kind of how the grading naturally works. We had proposed a small berm, you know, within that area. And at the time we weren't aware, we were kind of told to not touch any of the trees. So it seems like now if we are doing some plantings, we might have some more flexibility with that. You know, with just some minor tweaking of some grading. But there is a kind of a low point there. And actually just looking at the neighboring plan that was submitted, there is like kind of a natural swale that goes right to that from this property. So that was kind of a change in decision after getting that that point. But at the time, it was trying to keep it on our property. But you know, that like about 180 feet or so from the property line. So you know, about halfway, more than halfway through that parking lot along that run is going to that drain now. So you know, anything over a 2-year storm almost acts as impervious at that point. So we thought it was a reasonable way to go. You know, the only way to really get it through to the front would be to provide significantly more storage just because of it backing up. And then you'll see there's like a hatched area there. So, you know, not only by gravity was it a challenge, but that was also just like an area where we couldn't infiltrate. So.
No, I understand it. It's just curious if we could spread it out a little longer rather than have it just like that. If it was more linear, then if we're overflowing, it would tend not to just gully down in one spot. That's all.
Yeah, and actually the latest plan we have, actually that stone is rotated as well, and closer to the property line. So yeah, we've thought about that carefully, but
I guess this would be the staff. Are we going to have a perpetual condition that they're required to keep the debris that comes from the Canterbury Brook that may wash up on their property? You know, once a litter and all that, because that whole area tends to get all kinds of crap up on the sides. I know you're going to clean it to begin, but we're going to have a perpetual that once a year they're going to take a look and pick anything that they win, flow to the shore.
There's a standard perpetual maintenance condition which refers to the proponent, or I mean, in this case, it would just be whoever. We might want to fix the wording on it a little bit, but there is a perpetual maintenance condition that covers removing any debris in wetland resource areas.
Yeah.
So that could be included in that, and if there is more invasives work that's done, I mean, I think that would also probably if there's more invasives and like some restoration work that's done on the bank, I think that could maybe be looped into that work as well.
Right. And Kevin, I quickly looked at some of the weir elevations before it goes into Canterbury Street, but the water sewer will have you play with those numbers a little, you know, to hold a little more water inside the infiltration systems.
Okay.
Not a big deal, but
we're proposing I just checked it. It's close to about an inch and a half of storage below the orifice.
Yeah.
We had to provide the additional storage above just so it could back up without, you know, we had to provide some elevation where it would back up, but that's still being fine-tuned, but it's no,
it looks like you got enough area to do it. We just may want to hold a little more inside them before the release occurs. Not a big deal. So that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Before I go on, just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. Commissioner Linay.
I know a comment came up already about invasive management plan, but I just want to revisit that because I think the mention of knotweed being present just, you know, makes me believe that that's going to be about 3 years of continued treatment. So I think maybe the notion that it'll be planted with shrubs immediately might be a little bit unrealistic. So just sort of considering that sequencing. And then similarly, I guess to what Commissioner Sullivan was saying, I think thinking about that discharge point, and is there a way to incorporate, you know, check dams or something that's slowing that down, or I mean, ideally is some kind of, you know, pre-treatment, but maybe you're I understand that you're sort of minimizing the impact to that zone. And I think, let's see, I think I just had similar thoughts around the maintenance of the pervious pavers and also trying to reduce the parking. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we need a response on Commissioner Linay's checkpoints, I guess, I think is what you called them. Maybe Commissioner Sullivan has an idea on that.
Well, you got to remember when that thing's overflowing because of the storm, Canterbury Brook has gone sky high. So you don't, you when you look at it, you think it's just discharging down that deep slope. That deep slope is full of water because that Canterbury is taking a huge area. So the water and sewer will take a look at it and we'll work out something that'll minimize any potential gullying. I just brought it up because everyone does just that. And then when we get through with them, as sad as they may be, it seems to work a little better. But the good news is the Canterbury Brook rises up real high. So it minimizes that big slope.
Gotcha. That's good to know.
If I may address the knotweed comment as well, just quickly, Commissioner Linay. So I know I didn't kind of describe the presence of the knotweed, and everybody's seen kind of those streams that have the forest of knotweed that kind of overtakes the entire bank of the stream itself. You can't even see the brook. In this case, that's not how the knotweed is acting. It's a really small patch of it. It seems like it's only kind of one little system down towards the edge of the parking lot for the car wash on the project side of things. There also might be a little bit closer to the American Legion. So we'll take that into account when we're designing our invasive species management program, which we're going to be submitting prior to the next hearing. And then we'll take comment on that as well.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
Yeah. Maybe this is obvious, but I'm still confused by what somebody said about finding a line on the Scrub-a-Dub or whatever that is called property where you could put water. Could somebody revisit that subject for me?
Yeah, I'm happy to revisit that. We basically got a record plan from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission that was from 2023, where they had basically I don't have the exact dimension, a stone trench along the property line that had an outlet control structure with a domed grate that collected like half of that site's runoff before having an outlet to where it turns into a culvert at that point on their property. So it's just a way we can provide an overflow for the site that's kind of mimicking the existing drainage pattern where the drain closely, we're of course not going to pipe it directly to them, but it just provides like the thought was that it would be an area drain that pops that's below grade where it has some it's like sunken below the area around it with crushed stone, and then when that does fill, it has some way to kind of bubble up and then make its way over there to that drain. So it just would basically get it there at the same point without having the same kind of surface runoff through the car wash area.
Okay, and where does that go after it's been collected there?
It goes right to the Canterbury Brook. So that stream there, it turns into a culvert on the right where that our property line ends essentially. So but as John was saying, like storm events like those, it probably would be almost full. So it would still go to that point, and then it would have the outlet basically instead of going down the hill for the steep slopes. It would have that potential access point there if it if it has capacity.
And that would be a runoff from the parking lot essentially?
Yep. So it's like the volume of that system is designed to hold at least the first 1.5 inches of water, not accounting for any infiltration. But then the 2-year storm event we've provided in our stormwater report where it wouldn't overflow at that until any storm event over that.
Over the 2-year storm event.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the problem that I'm having, I think, is that it seems to me we're having 2-year storm events pretty frequently or more. And so, I'm a little, is there any other solution to getting that water and collecting it and putting it anywhere else but into the Canterbury Brook?
I mean, we could provide a connection to the brook where it actually discharges lower, but closer to the stream. We thought that was a less preferred option for the commission, so we didn't really explore that.
And why was that less preferred?
Just, installing piping and trenching through that area.
Okay, but through what area? I mean, through the, I'm not sure.
Like bringing it right down to the stream.
Okay. And so you would have to go through the various areas demarcated on this diagram that we're looking at. Is that it?
Yeah, we intended not to touch anything in the riverfront area.
Okay. All right.
And by gravity, we couldn't make it the other way, so.
Okay. And there's I don't understand exactly the elevation, but there's no way to put it into any kind of a system on the Canterbury Street side?
So I have to I'm looking right now, but essentially the invert of our connection of that drain main is like 46, which is about 2 or 3 feet lower than the rim of our catch basin. So we were to make it all flat, there's a no infiltration zone from like previous geotech reports and environmental reports. So we specifically couldn't infiltrate in that area. And
is anybody else experiencing that freezing? I didn't hear the end of that.
Sure,
Yeah.
Sullivan out here.
sorry about that. My Zoom just closed for some reason.
Yeah.
But
Could you just say that? Could you just finish your last sentence?
yeah,
Sort of-
yeah. So we just couldn't make it there by gravity. We'd have to add even more fill to that area to raise it up, which would increase the walls, the fill. You could pump it, but if that pump were to fail, that would probably be more of an impact to the river. So
And Commissioner, I'd want to add the capacity of Canterbury is limited also.
Okay.
So the municipal would not want to take it. It's preferable to have it, as explained. We were able to work with Scrub-a-Dub when they were before us to come up with that connection that works like a charm. And
Okay.
remember, like I mentioned, on a 2-year storm, that Canterbury Brook isn't that little blue sliver you see there. It's a big wide sliver. It gets full pretty quick.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move right on to the invasives then. Thank you very much, Commissioner Sullivan. Do I understand how many trees are you taking down? Are they all in your tan area as you've shown on this diagram?
So we're removing 8 trees. Of those 8 trees, 7 of them are Norway maples. The other is a green ash, I believe. Most of the removal is within the tan area, and then I believe there is 1 tree that's being removed in the 25-foot waterfront area, which is the orange area, but nothing within the 25-foot riverfront area on either side of Canterbury Brook.
Okay, and let me just ask, the reason that you're taking down the one in the sort of orangey area is what? Is that a disease tree in some way?
Well, it's an invasive, and I believe it's for the to build the stormwater outlet structure right there.
Okay. Okay, I mean, my view of Norway maples may be very different from people who know more about them than I do, but they are big trees that provide shade and also do other good carbon things as well, even though I understand that their root systems are very invasive. How many trees are you going to be putting back in to replace? Because when you talked about it, I think you talked about trees and shrubs. And the problem is that, as I remember the pictures that we looked at, those Norway maple trees are pretty big. And do you know the size of the trees that you're going to be replacing them with?
So So in total, there's 21 trees on the site. Only 20 of them are Norway maples, and I don't disagree with you that they are very large trees. They are considered invasive in Massachusetts. We're going to be replacing the 8 that were removed with 41 new trees spread throughout the site. I believe there's sizing in our landscaping plan, which was submitted as a supplemental for the notice of intent. And those trees, the 41, are going to be consistent of dogwood, tupelo, white oak, arborvitae, and I think 1 or 2 other species in there as well. So a good mix, which is going to bring a good diversity to the site, which is currently lacking right now. And that's certainly more than a 2-to-1 ratio for the 8 we're removing. And then additionally, 158 native shrubs as well.
Are any of the trees that you're planning to place trees that have a diameter that is larger than a few inches?
Let me take a quick look. So we have our arborvitaes that we're looking to plant are going to be 8 feet tall. We're going to be planting, the trees are going to have a 3-inch diameter at DBH. So they're going to be saplings when they're planted right now. There's not going to be anything massive like there currently stands in the field, but they're going to grow as the site develops.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your information. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Herbst?
Yeah, just a couple things. One is to reinforce the concern about parking and looking for that to shrink up. And as part of that, although they're Norway maples, I would look to be saving the ones that you can as part of creating that space because of their size and current benefit. And I just wanted to note, definitely not my expertise, but it seemed like your focus, and I know it's not complete at this point, but that your planting was primarily or maybe only in the waterfront area. I think others who've worked along the brook and what I think we would expect from you as well is to look at the riverfront area on both sides to see what can be done to improve things there.
Absolutely. And that was going to be a clarifying question, so I appreciate you bringing it out during your commissioner comment. So would that be how every commissioner would want to see it, with invasive management in the brook or in the 25-foot riverfront area on both sides, along with the 25-foot waterfront area as well?
I would think so.
I don't want to speak for them, but I think so. Yes, and I think that's what we as Elena mentioned, that you're maybe the 3rd or 4th project along the brook, and so we've been asking for that work from everybody. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Elena, any hands raised?
I am not seeing any hands raised, and we didn't have anything in the inbox either.
So we have
Oh, apologies. We have a hand raised.
Who do we have? Rick. Mr. Yoder.
Yes, thank you very much. If we could pull up, I'm just looking at public Q&A. If we could pull up that first slide, it said, the proposed conditions, the map, the site plan, rather, the first, yeah, that one. So I have 3 things I want to go over. One, I'll follow up on what we've just been talking to, and I want to thank commissioners for continuing to push for the rehabilitation of Canterbury Brook, where we're faced with it here. And also, just to be more clear on the eastern riverfront, the neighbor has 4 parcels, just a 289 Walk Hill project. And I think it's 4 of their 50-foot parcels go across Canterbury Brook at that point. They have taken responsibility right up to the sidewalk, which I think might be a little farther than the riverfront. That could be, even if it's a 5-foot difference, no one else is going to take responsibility for it. And so that's got to really be your responsibility. And it's a maintenance problem because of the fast food restaurants. There is a lot of trash that blows around. And you may want to look up street at 289 and see how they've dealt with the trash problem there. So I'm happy to see that's all, that's being addressed. Just another question I had on the storm drain down the Canterbury Street, which will be carrying some of the storm water. I don't know how far it goes before it dumps into Canterbury Brook, or maybe it's Stony Brook. But if it goes through the Stella Road neighborhood, which is to the south, their low area has tremendous flooding problems on heavy rains. And it really would be a bad idea to add much of a load to their drain system there, because it gets overloaded pretty fast as it is. So it's basically a question of what is the effect this is going to have, if any, on the Stella Road. And that's something Water and Sewer can address, I think. Another issue is I looked quickly last night through the document that was submitted for this, and there is, I don't know what to call it exactly, but there was a tremendous amount of material on many pages on a sampling survey of chemicals in the ground, basically. A lot of work, a lot of detail, but I could not find a summary page or a narrative on what it all meant. And I would like to hear what the summary is and what, if there's any basically hazardous materials that are above the acceptable level. And if that's an issue you're dealing with, does that have some effect on why you don't want to dig in certain places? I'd like to know what's down there. We've had a similar problem a few doors down a couple of years ago. So I think that's really my main question. So if you could answer those, that would be great.
So the 21E issue, what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's from my understanding, it's mostly urban fill. And we have to follow best practices and a soil management plan while we work there. In urban fill, there sometimes is traces of petrol.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to, use best management practices. For example, an LSP has been engaged and will be involved in the construction phase of this project. And certain soil segregation practices have to be followed when we excavate, and if any contaminated soil in the excavation area is found. But that urban fill is mostly, at the end of the parking area. That's also why we filed with DEP.
Okay. So I think you might have heard earlier in the evening. So any information you get when you're excavating, new conditions could come up. Certainly, when we get to an order of conditions here, that will be one of the conditions, is that you'll get that information to staff. Okay.
On the answer in Canterbury Street, that comes down as a 15-inch pipe, and it goes down to Canterbury, ties directly into the pipe portion of the Canterbury Brook, directly into Stony Brook. So it's a hard piping system directly into another hard piping system. It's 108-inch pipe that goes into a 200-inch pipe. They're big pipes.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, so it goes in before Stella Road, it sounds like.
It goes in way before Stella Road.
Okay.
Yeah, we know about the problem at Stella Road.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more question if I just forgot.
Okay, if you don't mind, we're going to try to wrap it up, so please.
Yeah, just quick back at the sidewalk and the Riverside front. I believe also 289 has agreed to shovel the snow on that section of the old sidewalk, and I think that would be a good thing for this owner to agree to also, because nobody else is going to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Basically, think of it as your property. I mean, you're adjacent, you're a butter to that sidewalk, and that would be your responsibility. Otherwise, they're not going to ever get shoveled.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your neighbor up the street has agreed to it, to 289.
Yeah, I think we can include that in our property management
Okay,
agreement.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I think we have a little bit of work to do here. Landscaping plan, I heard. Parking lot, would like to see a new design on the parking lot, and please be as creative as possible. Commissioner Herbst, do you want to throw out any guideline for how many feet we'd like to see that moved?
Well, I guess I'm thinking if it's half a foot off of each space going down, whatever that is, and then if the compact car spaces if the maximum compact car spaces are along there, then whatever that adds up to.
Okay. Okay, good. And invasives management plan. What else was there? I said landscape plan, invasive management plan, parking lot configuration. We're going to be requiring maintenance conditions. Oh, the specs on how you're going to clean the pavers. So management plan on that.
And I guess whatever update you do in concert with Boston Water and Sewer.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as well.
Okay, good. Okay, so a little bit of homework. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you, Earl.
Okay, take care.
Do we need to do a motion?
Oh, I am so sorry. I was just, I don't know, it's getting late.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Linay?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next item, notice of intent for DEP file number 2026 in Boston, file number 2025-005 from VHB Inc. on behalf of the City of Boston for the proposed excavation of 6 exploratory geotechnical borings within existing pavement and grass shoulders to support the resilient Bennington Street and Fredericks Park project along Bennington Street in East Boston. Resource areas, 25-foot waterfront area, 100-foot buffer to BVW, 100-foot buffer to Coastal Bank, and 100-foot buffer to Salt Marsh area. Who's here on behalf of the proponent?
Hi, this is Kat McCandless with the City of Boston.
Oh, okay.
And I'm joined by Taylor Donovan from VHB from our project team.
Fantastic. Okay. Good to see you. What do you have for us?
Awesome. Great to see you all, especially late at night this evening. So thank you for having us. My name is Kat McCandless. I'm a senior project manager with the City of Boston's Office of Climate Resilience, which was formerly known as the Climate Ready Boston Initiative, in case that update hasn't been relayed to you yet. I'm here tonight, as I mentioned, with Taylor Donovan from VHB on our project team to request review and approval of these geotechnical borings, as well as review of wetlands delineations. So this is associated with the Resilient Bennington Street and Fredericks Park project, the second phase of work. I'll give a bit of background on the project area and the project generally, and then I'll pass it over to Taylor to discuss the proposed work and the resource areas. So next slide, please. So this project may sound familiar to the commission because we saw approval for some borings around this time last year during phase 1 of the project. So as a refresher, this is a coastal resilience project being jointly led by the City of Boston in partnership with the City of Revere to address current and future coastal flooding originating from within Belle Isle Marsh that threatens 2 communities and regionally significant critical infrastructure, including the MBTA Blue Line and Bennington Street, which is one of 2 evacuation routes in East Boston. So phase Phase one of the project consisted of an alternatives analysis and feasibility study that evaluated nearly 24 options for how we could reduce flood risk throughout the project area, which is shown on the screen. And the second phase of the project that we are currently working on now is advancing the design of what was identified as the preferred resilience strategy in phase one. So as you can see on the screen, the project area spans both Boston and Revere, starting from the intersection of Leverett Avenue and Bennington Street near the MBTA Suffolk Downs T station at the southern end of the project area. It then moves north on Bennington Street, crosses over the border of Revere, wraps around a privately owned VFW or Veterans of Foreign Wars facility and a city-owned waterfront park in Revere called Fredericks Park, and then extends beyond the park behind some private residential properties. But the City of Boston portion of the project is located just on the Bennington Street right-of-way, which is owned by the City of Boston. So as I mentioned, we completed borings last year during the first phase of the project, which were completed within the grassy strip that's located between the Belle Isle Marsh and Bennington Street. And we're now seeking to complete additional borings within Bennington Street itself to inform the design and the structural engineering as part of phase two of the project. But so since we're currently just seeking approval for the borings, I kept this overview very brief, but I could definitely share much more detail about the project overall if you have questions. But just to stay on time, with that, I'll pass it over to Taylor to go over the precise locations of these proposed borings, potential impacts and mitigation measures.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kat. As she mentioned, my name is Taylor Donovan. I'm an environmental scientist with VHB. And so just before we move to the next slide, I'll just point out that the focus of this work, as she mentioned, is in the right-hand photo, just that area in pink within the project site. So we can go to the next slide. This is a high-level view of the plans. On the next couple of slides, we zoom in to see it in a little bit more detail. But essentially, we are proposing 6 geotechnical borings within and along Bennington Street. As Kat mentioned, most of them are within the roadway or the shoulders of the roadway, which are paved and previously developed. A couple of them are within the developed, sparsely vegetated bank to BVW on that northern side or plan north. Western side of Bennington Street. The reason you're seeing more than 6 proposed boring locations on the plan is because we've already identified alternative borings locations. As I'm sure you're aware, sometimes things in the field are not as they are anticipated but on the plans. So we've already identified 6 alternate locations, 1 for each of the proposed borings, just in case we do have to change those proposed areas. In the field, we already have designated locations and the commission is already aware of where those alternate locations would be located. So the proposed borings are the 6 dots that are shown in black and the alternate locations are shown in blue. And as Kat mentioned, we are looking for confirmation as well of the resource area boundaries shown on the plans. So I know there's a lot going on, so I'll give a brief overview and then on the next couple of slides, I can mention specifically which resource areas we're looking at. But essentially on the site, we have, and adjacent to the site, I should say, in the pink solid line, we're showing our extent of bordering vegetated wetland. In the red line, we're showing areas of coastal bank. And then in the dark blue on the right-hand side is our area of salt marsh. The yellow line is just pointing out the municipal boundary between Boston and the city of Revere. And then the solid teal line to the left of that is our inland bank. To the left of that, we have our 25-foot riverfront area. And then in the dashed black line along the length of the project site, we have our 25-foot waterfront area. And the buffer zones are shown in, the 100-foot buffer zones are shown as the dashed lines, and the colors correspond to the resource area they're buffering. And then the land subject to coastal storm flowage is shown as that dotted hatch that's shown essentially really on the eastern side of Bennington Street. So we can go to the next slide, please. So zooming in to the southern borings, we have 3 borings that are located, I want to say really at the edge of buffer zones for Coastal Bank and BVW for the first 2. And then the third one, that B103, is located just inside the waterfront area. So again, these borings are really minimal impact. We're conservatively estimating 5 square feet of impact for each, and it's just temporary within previously developed and disturbed areas. These are all within pavement. Again, just pointing out the resource area boundaries as shown on the plans, as we're looking for confirmation of those as well as part of this NOI. So we can go to the next slide just to see the other 3 boring locations. So again, the 2 B104 and B105 are just within that 25-foot waterfront area adjacent to the bordering vegetated wetland on the planned north side of Bennington Street. And then the last one is located within the center of paved Bennington Street. And we are showing the inland bank is to Sales Creek on the planned north or western side of Bennington Street. And because of the tide gate that's located there before it crosses under Bennington Street, we do have our riverfront area cutting off perpendicular to that. And we did describe in the NOI just why we decided that that jurisdiction we felt ended there with the, there's no mouth of coastal river line that's been established by DEP, but just looking at, they have several criteria that they use to draw those lines, one of which being water control structures such as the tide gate. So then on the eastern side of Bennington Street, we have Belle Isle Inlet, and that's where the salt marsh is associated. And then just want to make sure I don't miss anything because there's so much going on these plans. But I think that's enough to get us started with at least just talking about the proposed borings, and happy to answer any questions the commission might have about the resource areas as we've shown them delineated, but we do just have a couple, I think just 2 slides left, just briefly touching on what we've talked about. So again, seeking confirmation of the resource area boundaries, and this is just to assist with and hopefully streamline some future permitting efforts. As Kat mentioned, this is part of a larger project, so we anticipate that we will be back in front of the commission for that proposed work. So we just want to nail down the extent of the resource areas now to make that a little bit easier for everyone going forward. As well, we are proposing those 6 geotechnical borings within developed areas. And all of these borings would be, they are under the Wetlands Protection Act, located only within the 100-foot buffer zone and would be considered an exempt activity under 310 CMR 10.02 2B 2G. And then under the ordinance, our impacts are about 15 square feet of total temporary impact to the waterfront area, 25 square feet of temporary impact within the 100-foot buffer zone to resource areas, and 5 square feet of impact to the 100-foot salt marsh area. And next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight and point out there are no permanent impacts proposed as part of this exploratory work. The temporary impacts will be limited to previously disturbed areas along the corridor, and we will install erosion controls at the down gradient limit of work prior to the start of the drillings, and all disturbed areas will be backfilled and restored after the completion of work, and all of that should be within the same day of the borings being completed. So that is what we have for you, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. So Taylor, are you the wetland scientist that delineated the wetlands?
I am part of a team who has been assisting with the wetland delineations in this area just because they are so a bit tricky.
Understood. As far as the assertion that the work is exempt under the WPA, did DEP come back with anything in their comments when this was filed?
I have not seen any comments from DEP. I don't know if Helena has maybe received any, but I know we did receive the file number, and I have not seen any comments this time.
Okay. Okay. And one other question, someone's going to have to tell me where did that airplane come from, how it got there? It was in your picture in the foreground. Certainly it didn't land there. What's it doing there? Like,
are you
what is that
referring
facility?
to on the restaurant?
That's a restaurant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you referring in the project area photo?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a full scale airplane. It's like a model that's just on top of the roof of this restaurant.
Okay. And Kat, it sounds like you're working well with Revere.
Yes, working very well with Revere.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Elena, any comments on the wetlands delineations?
No comments. No, I just appreciate VHB's and especially Taylor's patience with the number of back and forth emails that we had about it. But no, yeah, feel good about those.
Sounds like you've thoroughly vetted this. Okay, I appreciate that.
Did my best.
Just want to remind members of the public to provide public comment. Please raise your hand or type in the chat the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you're calling in and cannot use the platform, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute yourself, or send your questions to staff via email at cc@boston.gov. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, my only comment is along with the borings, there's a 16-inch MWRA water main. And they require an 8M permit, which can take a little bit of time to get. So, and also please don't discover it because it feeds us. So.
Thank you. Yes, we actually did submit our 8M permit request. I think it went in today, actually.
That's it. That's all I had.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Linay?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richmond?
I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Commissioner Herbst?
Sorry, just one picky question. I noticed on the, this is on the wetlands delineation, you've got a note that says the inland bank extents are derived from a desktop analysis and maybe from 1979. I guess I'm wondering about that as something that we would accept.
Yeah, thank you. So we did, I did speak with Elena about this. In this particular location, I apologize, we don't have a closer aerial view of this location. It's primarily hardscaped bank and retaining walls in this area. To immediately on pretty much on the Revere side is the pumping station. So a lot of this area has been heavily disturbed to kind of feed where the water enters the pumping station there, as well as with, as I mentioned, the tide gate that's located where it's conveyed beneath Bennington Street. And then on the far side, we do have the MBTA railroad track. So it was a combination of limited site access and safety, as well as the area being, really, we have the plans showing those head wall locations or the retaining wall and head wall locations, and the fact that it's not a natural bank. So we don't anticipate that line has really moved at all since that was installed. If we're proposing work any closer or adjacent to that area, we certainly would have made a concerted effort to do a field delineation, but because we are just in the buffer zone and really not even touching or within the riverfront area or the waterfront area to that resource, we agreed that it would probably be sufficient for the purposes of this NOI.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jim, and I had a question just for Kat real quick.
Sure.
What is your intent to do here? Are you going to raise the roadway or what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we had a really robust alternatives analysis, largely due to the fact that we are so close to a salt marsh. And so we evaluated options for levees, for flood walls, and for elevating the road. Elevating the road is the option that we have collectively decided to progress forward. We've been working very closely with the Streets Cabinet at the city, MassDOT, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and many others, including Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh, who have been involved in this project with us through a stakeholder collaborative that's been underway. And as part of the road elevation, the intent is also to reduce the width of the road by about 23 feet on the marsh side per recommendations from MassDOT's traffic study that they completed a year or two ago now. And so we will be elevating the road and then creating a gradual slope down to the marsh to support marsh migration however we can. So that is what we're progressing with right now, but the goal is to really keep this roadway dry as a critical evacuation route and to also offer that protection to the MBTA behind it.
Right. I think what you ought to do is convince the Army Corps to build the dam like we want to do on Fort Point Channel at Saratoga Street. Then I think you get the whole Belle Isle Marsh as a storage area.
I think the Army Corps is looking at that. I should also note that the Army Corps has been working with us on developing these plans as well. So, yeah.
Another thought.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Elena, I don't see any raised hands. Did you get any comments?
There's one raised hand. Cindy,
Oh, okay. I see it now. Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. I know it's really late, and we appreciate at Friends of Belle Isle Marsh that both the cities of Boston and Revere have been working with us. Of course, we are very concerned about marsh migration, elevating a road in the fashion of a berm. may have an unintended consequence of walling the marsh in versus assisting with migration. So we look forward to staying deeply engaged, even more so than we have in the past, as this project progresses. We are anxious to any information the commission is able to gather and share with us regarding the borings and other information that's relevant to wetlands and marsh protection. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to issue the order of conditions and close the hearing.
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Linay,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
So much. Have a good
welcome.
night.
Okay, next item on the agenda is, let me grab it. It's a request for a determination of applicability from Howard Stein Hudson on behalf of the McClellan Highway Development Company LLC for the proposed infrastructure improvements, including new traffic signals, mast arms, pedestrian ramps, pavement markings, and the reconstruction of curbing and medians along William F. McClellan Highway from the intersection with Tomasello Way to Revere city limits. So for this one here, apparently, there's someone in our firm who has done some work for HYM over the last few months. I wasn't able to ascertain who the partners are in the McClellan Highway Development Company, LLC, but I'm assuming HYM is involved. I guess, Doug, you're on the line. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then I'll recuse myself and entertain a motion to appoint Commissioner Herbst as the chair for this hearing.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Linay?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. So who's here to speak for the project?
I'm Rick Latini with Howard Stein Hudson Civil Engineer. I'm also joined by my colleague Jess Kenny, who heads our environmental services group. And with the client, you saw Doug Manns, and as well as Abigail Middleton's on the line too. So if you go to my slides. You can go to the next slide, actually. So this project is mostly minor activities within a limited section of the state roadway of Route 1A adjacent to Suffolk Downs. It's mostly a pedestrian vehicle access and safety improvement project, and also some accessibility improvements. The limit of work stays completely within the footprint of the road, meaning it goes from the back of sidewalk to the back of sidewalk. We're not expanding the roadway or the sidewalk. We are requesting a determination of applicability because we are not, at least for state jurisdiction, we're completely within buffer zone, and because it's already all built out, we don't feel like we're altering any area subject to protection. And as would be expected, at the edge of work, we'll have compost filter tubes, and any catch basins with a limit of work will have silt sacks. Next slide, please. So this is part of the master plan project for Suffolk Downs, which you can see on the old racetrack on the right-hand side of this plan. Our work is shown highlighted in red for the work in the Boston side, and the orange highlight is actually on the Revere portion of the project. So Route 1A, as you all know, is a principal artery that has 2 lanes of traffic on each side with sidewalks on both sides of the road. The Tomasello Way today is not signalized, although when you go, if you're heading northerly, you can actually take a U-turn at this intersection, and if you're heading southerly, you can actually take a left-hand turn on the Tomasello Way. So part of this project is to signalize this intersection, and if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we're reconfiguring this intersection of Tomasello Way to on the left-hand side, we're slightly tweaking the median to allow that U-turn a little more queue. We're adding, you can see here, a new concrete median in the middle. This actually helps separate that U-turn from the left-hand turn traffic, which is kind of confusing today, particularly in rush hour traffic time. As you can see from Thomas Way, we're shrinking the width of it a little bit, reconstructing that island there to provide a better pedestrian refuge, because that's about a 100-foot crossing. And like I said, the biggest improvement here is, we're going to signalize this intersection, which is not signaled today. And this allows us to put the crosswalk that you see going across Route 1A, because there'll be a dedicated pedestrian phase on the signal. So anyhow, this intersection actually has discusses outside of the jurisdiction areas. You can see to the right where the jurisdictional areas are. Those are red lines or buffer zones. I don't know if you see the kind of purple and magenta line, like in the southbound lane up on the top right there. That's your waterfront area, your local waterfront area. So going to the right there, we will be redoing the signals at the jug handle. The jug handle is a turnaround. If you're going south, you can use that to turn around and go back north. There's already signals there. We are upgrading the signals to be modern, and we're also, similar to Thomas Way, adding a crosswalk across Route 1A. And so there'll be actually 2 new signals that don't exist today for that. Let's see what else I had for this slide. I think that might be it. Like I said, most of the work is within the existing sidewalks, and we'll be, let's see if you can go to the next slide, because we have a couple of slides. Just kind of want to show you what it looks like today. So on the left side, that's actually for that new pedestrian ramp near the jug handle. That's looking southbound, and we're replacing this sidewalk right here in place. We'll install compost filter tubes right up against the guardrail in this location. The next slide over is across 1A on the other side where the curb ramp will be. The curb ramps actually in both these will be right in front of these signs. So in this location too, we'd have the compost filter tube right up against the guardrail. And we're replacing the sidewalk in kind here. On the second photo, we're actually only going about 25 feet replacing the sidewalk. The rest of the sidewalk will remain as is. In that last photo on the right, I just wanted to show what the Tomasella looked like today, because you can see there in the middle of the picture, you see someone trying to take a left turn and someone trying to take the U-turn at the same time. It's not so bad when there's no traffic, but during rush hour, it gets a little bit scary. So the proposed work is entirely within the sidewalk and roadway infrastructure areas already. It's a limited project with just traffic signals and signage, pavement markings. We are milling and overlaying a portion of the road too, just at the end of the day, and there's some pavement markings. So we are actually requesting that the commission consider issuing a negative determination with appropriate conditions, just because it's all buffer zone work, and it's all completely in areas that are already altered with sidewalk and roadway infrastructure. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I do have some concerns, and I'll be interested to hear what my fellow commissioners think about considering this NRDA. The picture you provide don't really show it, but the sidewalk work you're doing goes over the creek on both sides of the road. And the sidewalk, I haven't been there, but looking through Google Earth aerial, it's about a 2-inch curb and then just drops down to the creek. I think it's a place where we might have required you to put in some kind of something underneath the bridge to keep stuff from falling into it. So that would be my concern. I see that you call it a limited project, but that actually applies for an NOI, not for an RDA. It's not relevant to an RDA. So the rest of the project, I wouldn't have any concerns, but I am concerned about the part that goes over the
Actually,
creek.
Well, I'll let the commissioners weigh in, but actually in that part, the retaining wall, as you know, actually comes up higher than the sidewalk, so there's a lip, so we can actually put the compost filter tube on top of that retaining wall, and we're actually not changing any grades out here, so we're replacing the sidewalk in kind. In other words, the sidewalk, when we're doing the construction, it actually can't even drain towards the creek because it has that lip of a retaining wall.
It's more the, it looks like a couple inch lip and you've got the guardrail there. It's hard to picture where the erosion control will go, but I mean, that's my perspective on it. So I'll let other commissioners speak to it. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, my only comment is there any drainage improvements or any issues with drainage anyway out there?
We're not proposing any drainage improvements, just with the mill and overlay, we'd just be adjusting the drainage rims. This is Mass DOT controlled road and they have
Yeah.
maps for that, so yep.
So, but there are no drainage issues over there? It's,
Not that we're aware of, and we are working with
Okay.
Mass DOT in this project.
yeah, no, that was
There's several-
that was,
Yep.
yeah. Other than that, it just looks like a redoing of a roadway milling and et cetera. So, you know, except for what Commissioner Herbst brought up, to me, it's not a big deal.
Commissioner Linay?
I think I agree with Commissioner Herbst on that. Because are you replacing that sidewalk with concrete at the point where it's adjacent to the wetland, or?
It's a mix of pedestrian ramps of cement concrete and the sidewalk is bituminous concrete. But like I said, once again, we're never gonna dig above the retaining wall lip, so the drainage can't go that direction. And if you're out there, you could actually see, you can put the filter tube, you could actually tie it on the guardrail above the retaining wall. So now you'll have like the compost filter tube is like 12 inches, then you'll have the lip on top of that. So it really blocks that area off from drainage going that direction, and everything's obviously graded towards the roadway too, on top of everything else.
Would the commission be amenable to a condition that requires like us to have an inspection after we put the erosion controls in prior to construction, so you could see them installed?
Possibly. I'll see what I'll finish taking comment from the commissioners.
Thank you.
Anything more from you, Commissioner Linay?
No, that's all.
Commissioner Richmond?
I'm sorry, I was muted. You know, I share the concern, and I suppose that, you know, that's the purpose of the NOI, is that you get that exact requirement after the hearing. So, you know, I'm a little bit in equipoise, because I think that, you know, the presentation is, yeah, it's already the way it is, and we're just gonna make it better, and we're not gonna do anything. But it may well be that with the best of intentions, the people who are actually gonna do that work, you know, may not have the same understanding of that issue as the people who are making the presentation tonight. Whereas if it were an NOI and there were that requirement, then it would be written and people would follow it. So, you know, I guess I'm of the same view as Commissioner Herbst at this point.
Okay.
Commissioners, I would just ask, if we did a negative, we'd be putting conditions anyway up there, right? So they'd have a whole list of conditions that they'd have to follow to boot. And I'm
With a
not-
negative determination, I mean, generally, you shouldn't have a whole lot, because it's a negative determination
No,
should
no,
mean.
Not a whole lot, okay, I take it back.
But-
But enough to worry about what we just brought up. I'm just wondering, we can go the NOI route. And after 3 or 4 more weeks and, you know, 9:30 at night, some night, we can come up with the same list of conditions. I'm just sure.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm not sure. I guess if it's a condition that staff must approve the erosion control, which is different than inspecting it as suggested, because I think staff, we might require something more than that, like the cloth underneath that we talked about. So
maybe staff should tell us what they think.
I think, yeah, the item that I did want to flag is that that we do commonly include erosion and sediment, like especially erosion and sediment control conditions on negative determinations, but determinations don't have to be recorded and they don't have to come back for a certificate of compliance, which is just something that I wanted to flag on this.
I think I'm okay with that. I guess I'm suggesting one step forward is that not that just that we're going to say there have to be them, but that the staff has to approve the proposed method of erosion control in advance.
Yeah, we would be comfortable doing that if the commission chose to do that.
Okay.
I would say the applicant is comfortable with that too. If that's a condition that you guys want to put on and have your staff approve it and inspect it, that's fine with us.
So with that in mind, I would entertain a motion to issue a negative determinant of applicability.
Chair Herbst, apologies, we have a raised hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cindy Baxter.
Sorry, it's just been a big Belle Isle Marsh night. So Friends of Belle Isle Marsh values the NOI process and the commissioner's oversight, including the site visit. I have personally walked across this area of the roadway. It is worth a visit, and certainly going through the NOI process doesn't mean you have to have a, a huge process, but I do feel, on behalf of Belle Isle, Friends of Belle Isle Marsh, that perhaps the RDA is a quick hit that is not necessarily the right course of action for part of a very, very large project that has an impact over several bodies of water and wetlands. So I just thank you for that consideration.
Okay, thank you for your comment. I'm inclined to think, as Commissioner Sullivan suggested, that we will get where we were going to be with an NOI if we issue an RDA as we're contemplating it.
And I can certainly follow back up with staff, and we certainly plan to get more involved with the Suffolk Downs HYM team, but appreciate that opinion. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if it helps at all or not, but we did file a notice of intent with Revere because there's land subject to coastal storm flowage on their side. So Cindy, if you need to join, so you have another chance to express your concern there. But like I said, I appreciate it, and I just wanted to let you know that DP will look at it, and we have an NOI right next door because of that. So
thank you. Yeah, one of our challenges is the City of Boston Conservation Commission, as you know, tends to meet at the same time as the Revere Conservation Commission. So Rick, I'm really pleased that you brought that up because we haven't been able to replicate ourselves as much as we'd like to. I will definitely look into it. Thank you.
Yeah, but not that anybody cares, but if you continue me, I've got 2 hearings on the same night.
I hear you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to issue a negative determinant applicability with the condition that the Conservation Commission staff must approve the method of erosion control with respect to the creek.
February, guys. Already done my yearly thing, so keep me out of this.
Would anybody like to make that motion?
Well, I would certainly make that motion, but I would, with all respect, like it to be a little more specific than that, because what you said at the beginning, Commissioner Herbst, seemed to me to be very important. So, can we make that motion? That they approve it with staff, be more specific as to what the concern is?
Well, but I guess the condition would be that staff approve of erosion control that will ensure no impacts on the creek, including blown or other kinds of material getting into the creek. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, be very specific about what the concern is. And if they've agreed to it, which it sounds like they have, then, that's what they're going to tell the people who are going to actually do the work. So with that motion, with that addition, I will move that we make a determination of non-applicability.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Linay,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And
Okay.
now, Chair Parker, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just want to note there's been a number of continuances. Continued have been notice of intent for DEP file number 006-1996 in Boston, file number 2024-021, DEP file number 006-2025, and unassigned DEP file number from Foth Engineering on behalf of Massport regarding the Black Falcon terminal. Now we'll begin our regular meeting. The first item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061942 and Boston file number 2023-3031 from Epsilon Associates on behalf of the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the Draw 7 Path Parkway extension located at 80 Alfred Street in Charlestown, resource area 25-foot riverfront area and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Elena?
Yes, staff conducted a site visit for this, and based on our review of the materials as well as the site visit, we believe that the work has been done in compliance with the order of conditions which was issued for it. We also just want to know that DCR is maintaining the path. We were there after some snow, and the path was very clear and was in use by people, which was exciting to see. Some people using it to bike places, I guess, and avoid the traffic. But yeah, so yeah, based on that, we would recommend issuing a certificate of compliance with the associated maintenance conditions of numbers 27, 45, 46, and 51.
It certainly beats driving your bike around the rotary at Sullivan Square.
Yep. I think being on a bike anywhere near this path is seems terrifying.
Okay, any questions from any commissioners? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for DEP file number 0061942 and Boston file number 2023-031.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Linay?
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond? Commissioner Herbst?
No, I'm sorry. I vote aye. I was
Thank you.
muted.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay, Alyssa, thank you for being at the ready, but we didn't have any.
I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is administrative updates.
We have none tonight.
Okay, I'll take it. Next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes from January 22nd and 2025 and February 5th of 2025. I reviewed both of them. I made minor edits. They were done masterfully. Do any commissioners have any questions? Come on, Commissioner Sullivan, you have a question. You read the minutes in fine detail.
No, I knew you'd pick up the things I was picking up, so I'm good with it.
Fantastic. Okay. Hearing no questions, I'd entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from January 22nd, 2025 and February 5th, 2025.
So moved.
We have a second. Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Richmond?
Aye.
Commissioner Herbst?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That carries 5-0. Okay. We're here, finally. So, anybody have any objection to ending this meeting by way of adjournment? No? Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see everybody in a few weeks. Take care.
Thank you all. Thank you to our interpreters as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Think we could stop there stop